You don't need to visit a cemetery or an abandoned house to find yourself in a nightmare. Sometimes, it starts where you eat lunch, sleep every night, or play games for fun. What would you think if a customer walked into McDonald's but never walked back out? Your roommate started closing their door at 3 a.m. and whispering to themselves in the dark. A fun day at the beach ended with strange footprints in the sand, leading straight to your tent. An innocent video game began sending messages through your mic, even though no one was on the other end. A birthday party filled with balloons and laughter, until you realized the person who sent the gift wasn't on the guest list. And a weekend ski trip turned into a desperate escape through snowy woods, where you left no tracks behind but saw others following yours. What you're about to hear is all true, and none of them ever thought they were living in a horror story. They were just doing what everyone else does: eating, hanging out, sharing rooms, gaming, and celebrating birthdays. The only difference is they were never the same afterward. And don't leave the video early. The final story might just make you think twice about falling asleep while your roommate is still awake. Welcome to where the most ordinary things are also the most terrifying. Travis was only 19. The kind of age when people still dream of big things: a road trip, a first novel, or, at the very least, a fleeting summer romance. But Travis wasn't dreaming. He needed money. And McDonald's, with its minimum wage and overnight shifts, was the fastest way out of a bank account shriveled like a starved heart. It was his first night working the graveyard shift. The manager called around 8 p.m., saying the previous overnight worker had quit due to a sore throat, a vague excuse everyone knew was a lie. But Travis didn't care. He threw on his jacket, grabbed the headset, got in his car, and drove off, like a young soldier volunteering for a war he didn't understand. The McDonald's was located off Highway 61, nestled in a small town that already felt too quiet during the day. At night, it was a different kind of quiet. Streetlights flickered. The night wind swept through the empty parking lot, carrying a soft, hissing sound, like a whisper from someone no one could see. Travis arrived at 8:30, his hands frozen stiff, but with a quiet confidence that everything would go fine. The shift manager that night was Jerry, a balding, beer-bellied man who was always glued to the computer in the back office. As soon as he saw Travis, he shoved the drive-through headset into his hand and disappeared, leaving Travis alone in the brightly lit yet empty restaurant. Travis stood behind the counter, eyes drifting toward the large glass windows exposing the blackness outside, a thick darkness, as if it clung to the glass itself. What he didn't realize was that the silence, that deep, prolonged silence, was the first sign that something was very wrong, and that something was waiting for him on the other side of the drive-thru. By around 10 p.m., the McDonald's was as empty as a stage after a show. Just a few cold fries left in the tray, and the soft hum of the refrigeration unit behind the counter. Travis quietly checked the drive-thru station. Everything was in place, almost too perfect, as if someone had arranged it all to be still, dead still. And then it rang, a sharp bing. That unmistakable chime signaled a car had entered the drive-thru lane. Reflexively, Travis pressed the mic and spoke. "Welcome to McDonald's. May I help you?" No response, no engine sounds, not even a breath, just static, like an old TV with no signal, but deeper, heavier, like fingernails scraping against a thin veil separating this world from something else. Travis waited a few seconds, turned off the mic, assumed it was a glitch, but not even a minute later. Bing! The chime rang again, louder, sharper, like a warning from a place beyond reality. Travis pressed the mic again. "Hello? May I take your order?" This time, the sound that came back chilled him to the bone. A breath. Long. Wet. Close. As if someone was leaning into the mic. Not to speak, but to smell. Travis stepped back, took off the headset, and placed it on the counter. He turned, about to go find Jerry when, bing! A third time. Travis swallowed hard, hands trembling slightly as he put the headset back on. But this time, before he could say a word, a long scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across glass, pierced through the headset. It echoed as if coming from the bottom of a deep, long tunnel. Then, a scream, ripping through the silence like a blade. Travis yanked off the headset, nearly throwing it to the floor. His breathing was shallow, chest pounding like war drums. But the true terror hit when the sound didn't stop. Even with the headset lying on the counter, the mic stayed open. The noise kept playing. He rushed to the drive-through window. No car, no customer, not a single soul in sight. But the sound kept playing. Wind howled through the trees in the distance. The menu board glowed with a strange bluish-white hue, cold and sickly. Travis stepped closer to the mic. He didn't know what he was expecting. An explanation? A face? Or something far worse to end this waiting? And then, the voice came. "I see you." Just 4 words, soft as the wind, but enough for Travis to understand that it was close. Closer than anyone had ever stood at the drive-through window that night. Travis spun around and bolted back into the restaurant like someone being chased by something invisible. The kitchen lights were still on. Heat radiated from the fryers, but it couldn't drive away the cold crawling up his spine. This cold didn't come from the weather. It came from within, as if some part of his body had just been touched by something that didn't belong to this world. Jerry was still sitting at the desk in the manager's office, head down, staring at the screen, earbuds in. He hadn't heard a thing, had no idea. Travis wanted to scream, to tell him everything, but he stopped. Who would believe him? "You okay?" Jerry asked without looking up from the shift schedule. Travis nodded. A stiff, twisted nod, like someone whose voice had just been strangled. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. 1:12 a.m. The red digits of the digital clock blinked above the POS screen. Travis walked back to the drive-through counter, where the headset still lay, like a small creature that had just been soothed by the whispers of a stranger. He didn't dare put it back on, but he couldn't walk away from it either. Leaning on the counter, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through Facebook. Not reading, just keeping his hands busy. 1 minute, 5, 10, then suddenly, a cold draft slapped his left hand. Startled, Travis turned around. The drive-through window, which had been shut tight, was now cracked open, about 2 inches. No click, no breeze. It just opened, as if someone outside had just tried to reach in. Travis's heart pounded. His chest clenched like a fist had wrapped around it. He slowly stepped forward and slid the window shut. It glided smoothly back into the frame. Too smoothly, as if it had never been opened mechanically at all. Then a voice spoke. Not through the headset, not from a speaker, but from inside his own head. "Don't turn around." Travis froze. The air thickened like gelatin. He could feel a presence. It wasn't behind him. It was inside the restaurant, and it was watching. He swallowed dryly, his whole body in full alert mode, like an animal moments from being pounced on. But nothing happened. Just the faint sizzle of the fryers in the distance, and silence. A kind of silence, laced with malice. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the entire restaurant. No one. Nothing. But as he passed the convex mirror near the drink station, the one installed so staff could monitor the whole dining area, Travis saw something. A figure, blurry, faint, standing between the rows of tables. No head, no face, just a long, thin, dark form facing him. He whipped around. Nothing there, but in the mirror, it was still there. Travis stood frozen in front of the convex mirror, eyes locked on the dark figure standing motionless at the far end of the dining area, the spot that should have been empty all along. The shadow didn't move. It wasn't clear or defined, but it knew he was watching. A thought flashed through Travis's mind. If I turn away, it will move closer. And as if hypnotized, he lifted one foot and began stepping backward, one step at a time, never taking his eyes off the mirror. As he neared the manager's office, he pounded on the door. "Jerry, open up!" No response. He hit harder, now shouting, "Jerry, there's someone in the store. I'm not joking." Still nothing. Travis glanced back at the mirror. The shadow was gone. Just an empty lobby now. Neatly tucked chairs, flickering fluorescent lights, and something faint, like the air there had once been disturbed, but left behind no trace. He turned, ready to sprint straight for the front entrance. But just as he reached the counter, the drive-through window slammed open, this time so violently that the aluminum frame struck the glass with a sharp, ringing clang. Travis froze. From the darkness outside, a face pressed against the window frame, not clearly defined, just two blank eyes, pupilless, black like charred coal, and a grin pulled wide, as if carved open with a knife. No words, no breathing, just Travis, and something not human, watching him through the drive-through window. Travis ran, kicked the back door open, fled into the night, never looking back. That night, Jerry swore he hadn't heard a thing. The security cameras had coincidentally gone out at the exact time. No audio, no footage, no proof. No one believed Travis. No one. Except the one behind the glass. Travis never returned to McDonald's. But every so often, when he drove past, he'd see the drive-through window slightly ajar, even when the store was closed. And if he looked too long, those eyes would appear again, staring straight at him and smiling. Charlotte wasn't easily scared. She grew up on the edge of the city, in a place full of trouble, where kids had to grow up fast or get swallowed whole. But there was one thing she had avoided her entire life. One thing that made her stomach twist and her throat go dry: public restrooms. Not because they were dirty, but because of that feeling. The sensation of being watched from somewhere every time she sat alone in one of those dimly lit stalls, as if something was lying underneath. That night, Charlotte was on her way back from a road trip with her two best friends, Ruby and Jen. The three of them had been driving across West Texas for days, sleeping in the car, showering at gas stations, laughing like exhaustion didn't exist. But now, Charlotte was truly tired. And worse, she needed to pee so badly her stomach was cramping. "Can we stop at the next McDonald's?" she asked, trying to mask the urgency in her voice. Ruby glanced in the rearview mirror. "Don't worry, I'm about to pee my pants too." Less than 10 minutes later, they spotted a lone McDonald's glowing by the side of the road. Its yellow lights poured onto the cold pavement, making it look less like a restaurant and more like a rest stop for wandering souls. Charlotte leapt out of the car like she'd just been freed. She pushed open the heavy glass door and hurried across the lobby, heading straight for the women's restroom. Ruby stayed behind to place their order. Jen was checking her phone. No one followed her. The door swung open and she stepped in. Empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled like a mix of cleaning chemicals and something else. Old, damp, sticky, clinging to her nose. Charlotte shivered. 3 stalls. 1 choice. And as if fate had been carved into the earth itself, she pushed open the door to the second stall and locked it behind her. Outside, the night kept moving. And something, not human, but still breathing, was waiting for the first time she would look down. Inside the second stall, Charlotte sat down and exhaled. The dim yellow light cast her shadow against the dirty white tile wall, blurry and hunched like an animal trapped in a cage. She hated this feeling, hated the vulnerability, hated how every sound, no matter how small, echoed as if being recorded. A single droplet of water fell from the ceiling to the floor with a plop. In the cramped silence, Charlotte winced. She looked around. No stains, no leaks, just the steady drip, 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 like a ticking clock. Then, the restroom door creaked open. Creak. Charlotte stopped breathing. A footstep. Slow, soft, like rubber soles, but too slow. As if someone were deliberately trying not to make noise, but still wanted her to know they were there. Then, silence. Charlotte waited. 1 minute, 2, no sound of a stall unlocking, no toilet flush, no rustling of toilet paper, just a thick, choking emptiness. As if time itself had been held in place by something that didn't belong in this world. She started to feel a tingling on her skin, a very real physical sensation, like someone was staring through the stall wall, even though there were no gaps. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath. Probably just someone drunk. It's fine. Just finish and get out. But then, from deep in her gut, where instinct lives, something knocked hard. Checked the floor. She slowly bent down, eyes locked on the narrow gap under the stall door, where the light from outside spilled in, casting a faint, blurry glow. No shoes, no shadow. Even slower now, she leaned sideways, peeking through the crack between her stall and the one next to it. And she saw him, not standing, lying, flat on the ground, head tilted upward, eyes wide, staring directly at her through the gap. He had been there. God knows how long. His eyes were unblinking. His face was pale as paper, hair matted like wild grass, and between his lips, a toothless grin, black and wet. Charlotte froze. He had been waiting for her to look, and now he had been seen. A raspy chuckle rose from below, soft, but unmistakably pleased, as if she had just stepped into the trap he'd been lying in for hours, or years, or from a place outside of time. Charlotte shot up, yanking her pants up, bursting through the stall door with a slam that made the restroom mirror tremble. She gasped for air, spun around, but no one was there. The restroom door never closed, and beneath the stall next to hers, no one was lying there anymore. Charlotte stood there, in the middle of the cold tiled room, chest heaving, sweat soaking the back of her neck. Everything was silent, like a cemetery scrubbed clean with chemicals. She turned to look at the stall door, the one he had been lying behind, pressed to the floor just moments ago. Now it was empty, no sounds, no drag marks, no evidence. Charlotte didn't go in. Instead, she slowly backed away, eyes sweeping every corner, as if afraid a hand might shoot out from the drain or from the cracks in the floor tiles beneath her. She glanced up at the mirror, and that was when she truly panicked. The mirror didn't reflect her, or more accurately, something was wrong with the reflection. She was standing there, panting, hair a mess, eyes bloodshot. But the figure in the mirror, also her, was smiling. Charlotte wasn't smiling. The reflection blinked, tilted its head. That familiar head tilt she did when pretending to be cute, except it tilted the opposite way. Charlotte stumbled backward, bumping into the sink. Water dripped onto her hand, ice cold. "What the hell is happening?" she whispered, mind spinning. Then the restroom door swung open. "Charlotte?" It was Ruby. Hurried footsteps echoed on the tiles. Ruby appeared, eyes wide, holding a tray of sodas. "Where were you?" "I kept calling. Are you okay?" Charlotte said nothing. She didn't know where to start. Didn't know if, by telling the truth, she'd sound delusional, or just exhausted from days of no sleep. "There was someone," she whispered, "under the floor, watching me." Ruby was silent for a moment, then let out a half laugh, part reassuring, part uncomfortable. "Maybe you just imagined it. Let's go?" Charlotte nodded. 2 days later, Charlotte still hadn't slept. She lay in her dorm bed, staring at the ceiling as it spun like a warped vinyl record. Ruby thought she was in shock. Jen joked that she should turn her ghost story into a short story for the campus magazine. Only Charlotte knew it wasn't a story. Since that night, she had stopped looking into mirrors. Every time she accidentally caught her reflection, on a bus window, on a dark phone screen, she flinched, because that gaze no longer felt like it belonged to her. It wasn't just in her head, because the next morning, as Ruby brushed her teeth, she said, "Did you stick a picture of someone's face in the bathroom? I saw something weird reflected behind me in the mirror. Then it vanished." Charlotte didn't reply. She just pulled the curtain over the mirror and taped the bottom edge shut. A week later, the McDonald's where it all happened was temporarily shut down. Plumbing maintenance issues, they said. Rumors spread that someone had been living in the ceiling, slipping down through maintenance shafts at night. A homeless man on the run from police since the year before. But Charlotte knew. If it were just a man, he wouldn't appear in the mirror. He wouldn't move without making a sound. And he wouldn't leave behind that stare, cold as metal soaked in vinegar, the one she still felt every time she was alone, every time the sun went down. Once, while lying on her side with her face near the floor, Charlotte swore she could hear breathing. Close, software uneven, as if someone were lying under the bed, neck bent back, nose nearly touching the floor, and was just waiting for her to look down. Now, she no longer dared let her foot dangle off the edge of the mattress, because whatever it wasn't under the restroom floor anymore. It had followed her home, and it was still watching. Gregory Martin had always hated mornings, but he didn't hate McDonald's. He was the kind of man who lived alone, slept at odd hours, and started his day with watery coffee and a mass-produced pastry. Not because he liked it, but because he knew exactly what would happen: a McMuffin, a $4.18 receipt. And the cashier named Sarah always asks, "Extra ketchup today, Mr. Gregg?" There was a strange comfort in repetition, especially when the rest of his life offered nothing certain. That morning, Gregory left the house later than usual. On the way to McDonald's, the radio blared breaking news. A robbery had occurred near Highway 36. The suspect was still at large. Gregory didn't pay attention. There were always worse people out there than him. McDonald's was already packed. The dashboard clock read 7:42 a.m. The crowd stood in line like robots waiting to be recharged. The air smelled like fried meat mixed with cleaning chemicals. Orders being shouted, trays clanging, upbeat music playing with a forced cheerfulness. Gregory stood near the back of the line, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the hanging menu overhead. He was debating whether to try the new sandwich, which looked suspiciously identical to the old one, when a very faint sensation brushed the back of his neck. Not wind, not imagination, a clear, unmistakable feeling. Someone was standing right behind him, closer than anyone should be, and watching him like he'd already been chosen. Gregory didn't turn around, but his heart started pounding. His hand tightened around the car keys in his pocket. His shoulders tensed, as if bracing for something to touch him. And it would. In just a few more seconds, it touched him on the fourth heartbeat. A hard, icy object, not sharp, not jagged, but with enough weight for Gregory's body to know it could kill someone. And someone was pressing it directly against the softest part of his spine. Not a stab, not a threat whispered with malice, just a touch, gentle, but intentional. Gregory froze, didn't dare take a deep breath. Behind his neck, a hot breath brushed against his skin. Then a voice, low, gritty, almost as if it were crawling out from inside someone's chest. Don't turn around. Don't say a word. Take your wallet out, slowly. No one needs to die this morning. The voice was calm in a terrifying way, as if this wasn't the first time he'd done this. Gregory felt small, fragile, not because the man behind him was huge, but because Gregory, right here, in a well-lit McDonald's, surrounded by people, could disappear, and no one would even notice. He glanced around. A staff member is wiping down the counter. A little girl giggles with her mother. The man in front of him was still staring up at the menu, completely unaware that someone behind him was living through a nightmare. Gregory slowly pulled his left hand from his pocket. "My wallet. It's in the car," he whispered. A lie. Silence. Stretching. Long and heavy. Then the voice again, this time closer to his ear. "We'll go out there together. You go first. If you run, I shoot. If you scream, I shoot. You understand?" Gregory nodded. His throat felt full of sand. He took a step forward, then another. His back burned, as if that stare was scorching through his shirt. His hands were drenched in sweat. He used to think that if he were ever robbed, he'd fight, yell, resist. But now, with cold metal pressed against his spine, he just wanted to live. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a little boy playing with a Happy Meal toy, sitting snugly between two booths. That boy, he could be a witness, or the next victim. Gregory swallowed again. The man's breath was still there, not hot, not cold, just a smell, like rusted iron and unbrushed teeth. And a thought exploded in Gregory's mind. This man isn't robbing me because he needs money. He's playing. And Gregory? It was just a toy. Gregory stepped slowly out of the line. The man followed closely behind, each step in sync, like two friends out for a walk. No one noticed. No one saw the gun. No one saw the panic in Gregory's eyes. Everyone was buried in cheap background music, the hiss of fryers, and the smell of slightly burnt muffins. "Back door," the man whispered. "Not the front. Go left." Gregory knew the place. An employee exit. No cameras, no people. A perfect spot to disappear. He walked in that direction, head down. Fingers clenched around the keys in his pocket. The trembling now reached his knees. His mind was in chaos. Resist? Run? Collapse and pretend to faint? But every plan ended with the same image. A bang, a splash of blood, a body crumpled beside the soda fountain. They neared the door. A nudge from behind made Gregory stumble. "Move faster," the man growled. "Don't make me lose my patience." Bang! A loud crash echoed from the middle of the restaurant. Someone, a young boy in a Little League uniform, had crashed into Gregory from the side. The tray in the boy's hands flew. Drinks are splashing everywhere. In that split second, Gregory looked up and locked eyes with the man. He saw his face clearly for the first time, younger than expected, patchy stubble, bulging eyes, and a mouth clenched with rage. Something small and black dropped to the floor. The gun. Everything froze. Gregory looked down, then around. 1 heartbeat. 2. No one moved. Until instinct kicked in. He shouted, "Gun!" On the floor. The words rang out like a fire alarm. A woman screamed. A child wailed. A security guard ran in from the front. The man lunged. But Gregory dove, throwing his body over the weapon like it was the last thread holding his life together. A kick. The man bolted, disappearing into the chaos of the panicking crowd. 5 minutes later, McDonald's was on lockdown. Police arrived. Gregory was escorted out, shirt soaked in soda and blood from a gash on his knee. The gunman wasn't caught immediately, but people called Gregory a hero. Gregory didn't feel like one, because the thing that haunted him wasn't the man. It was the feel of that cold gun barrel pressed against his back, and that voice, not loud, not angry, just a quiet message from somewhere darker than daylight itself. 3 days later, Gregory still hadn't had a full night's sleep. He lay on his side in his small apartment, curtains drawn shut, TV playing a silent news channel. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in that line. The smell of McDonald's in his nose, and something cold and metallic gently pressing against his back. The man still hadn't been caught. He had vanished as if he'd never existed. Police said he might have used a fake name, might have been a drifter, might have left the state. Gregory didn't believe it. He wasn't the kind of man who ran. He was the kind who waits. A seasoned player. Someone who'd come back. When Gregory no longer remembered to look over his shoulder. Since that day, Gregory has changed. He stopped going out for breakfast, stopped standing in lines at the supermarket. In elevators, he faced the corner so no one could stand behind him. In his rearview mirror, he always saw something. A shadow, a blurry face, an unblinking gaze. Sometimes, while waiting at a red light, he'd hear that voice again, right behind his neck. "We'll go out there together. Don't scream. Don't turn around." He'd spin around, no one there. Just morning sun, passers-by, and a world moving on. As if no one but him had ever lived through that moment. One morning, he woke up and sat bolt upright in bed. There was something he knew. Someone had been standing behind him while he slept. No trace, no touch, just standing there, very close. And in a moment that stretched like eternity, Gregory understood. It had never left. It had simply changed places, from behind his back to inside his head. After 3 weeks of drifting from one friend's house to another, Nate began to understand what it meant to be invisible in the city he once called home. Every night, he slept on a different couch, always trying to stay quiet, not be a burden, as if his very existence was something unwelcome. When his relationship with his parents shattered beyond repair, he was forced to leave home, taking with him nothing but a torn suitcase and his last $200. One rainy afternoon, as the light outside turned to lead and the rain tapped lightly on the cafe window, Nate scrolled through a room rental app. One listing made him pause. Private room in private home, $600 per month, no parties, no alcohol, no basement access. The last line was in all caps, just a small detail, but it made the message feel like a warning disguised beneath polite lettering. The landlord was a man named Caleb, thin like a bare tree in winter, with eyes that always seemed to be hiding from themselves. When Nate came to view the place, Caleb opened the door just wide enough to slip through, then led him inside with a voice so soft it almost seemed to come from somewhere else. The house was small, one story, open concept, with white-gray walls. Everything was neat, clean to an unsettling degree, as if no one had ever lived there, or all traces of life had been erased. Caleb said he worked during the day, was usually out, and that Nate would have the space mostly to himself. "Don't go into the basement," Caleb repeated, this time slower, as if trying to burn it into Nate's memory. Nate nodded. No contract, no receipt. Just a dry handshake and a promise to pay cash at the start of each month. And so, Nate moved in, unaware that he had just stepped into a house that wasn't quiet at all, but was merely holding something back, something that was beginning to stir. At first, everything unfolded just as Caleb had promised. The house was quiet, clean to the point of coldness, and Caleb, true to his word, had almost disappeared from the world. Some days, Nate heard nothing at all except the hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of a clock. No conversation, no encounters. Just a small piece of paper taped to the fridge at the start of each month, reminding him of rent. Nate thought he was lucky. He had finally found a stable place after countless sleepless nights on other people's floors. But slowly, that stability began to crack. It started with faint noises at night. Not clear, not constant. Just a very soft sound, like someone moving objects in the room next door. But there were only 2 people in the house, and the only room next door was the basement. The one Caleb had explicitly said never to enter. One night, Nate woke up around 2 a.m., not because of a noise, but because of complete silence. The kind of silence you notice in the middle of a forest, when even the insects stop making sound. The kind of silence that tells you something is happening. He quietly got up to go to the bathroom, but as he stepped into the hallway, Nate froze. The basement door was open, not wide open, just enough for a faint yellow light to seep through. A dull, old light, the kind that comes from outdated round bulbs, and it flickered in an unnatural rhythm. Nate looked down the stairs where they vanished into the earth like the throat of some sleeping creature. Then, Caleb appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He stood still, said nothing, just looked up with an empty gaze. And in that moment, Nate realized something wasn't right about Caleb. Not the eyes, not the expression, but the way his body was standing, stiff, almost motionless, as if he weren't truly there, like a puppet hung up on the wrong strings. "Close the door," Caleb said, not yelling, not angry, just softly. But there was something in that voice that sent a chill down Nate's spine. He quickly obeyed, returned to his room, closed the door, locked it. That night, Nate didn't sleep a wink, not out of fear, but because of something stranger than fear, curiosity. He started noticing things. That Caleb, who claimed to work all day, was always home. That the fridge never got fuller, even though Nate had never seen Caleb go grocery shopping. That once night fell, the footsteps in the house outnumbered the people living in it. There were things Nate couldn't explain, but deep down, he knew one thing. This house wasn't quiet. It was simply listening. On the 7th night, Nate didn't turn off the lights. He lay on his bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, his mind spinning like a scratched record. Every creak of the wooden floor, every gust of wind brushing the window was enough to make his heart jolt. But no sounds came from the basement anymore. No door creaking open, no footsteps. Too quiet. And that was the terrifying part. Around 3 in the morning, Nate drifted into a daze. But sleep was just a trap. A soft sound, like fingernails scratching across wood, pulled him back from the edge of slumber. And then, footsteps, right beside the bed. When Nate turned his head, he couldn't scream. Not because of fear, but because his entire body froze, like a stone shackled in snow. Caleb was standing there. His silhouette blocked the nightlight, casting a long shadow across the wall. He bent down, his face just inches from Nate's, eyes like two bottomless holes. "You went into the basement, didn't you?" he whispered, his voice even and lulling, like the lullaby of a madman. Nate wanted to retreat, but couldn't. His hand was still under the blanket, his whole body curled up like a child caught by the dark. I locked my door," Nate whispered back, his voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Caleb smiled faintly, then lifted his left hand, empty. "You think a lock is enough?" He stood up straight and walked to the door. But before he left, he said something Nate knew he would never forget. "Tomorrow, you should go. This house isn't right for you." Then he closed the door, softly, without a sound. Nate shot up as if breaking the surface after nearly drowning. He didn't wait for sunrise. It took less than an hour to pack everything, which wasn't much. A few sets of clothes, an old book, and a couple of unpaid bills. He left while it was still dark, driving with trembling hands, checking the rearview mirror over and over. When the first light touched the horizon, he stopped at a gas station on the outskirts of town, poured himself a coffee, and stared at his hands. They were still shaking. But what terrified Nate more than the night before was how Caleb knew exactly what he had done, how he entered the room without a key. And most of all, the feeling that Caleb wasn't angry. He was just disappointed. Nate left that house before sunrise, leaving behind nothing but a hastily written note. "I'm not staying. Don't contact me." No one replied. Caleb didn't call, didn't email, didn't show up. And yet, a few nights later, as Nate curled up in an old coat, sleeping in his car in a supermarket parking lot, the footsteps still followed him. Not real, but not exactly imagined either. Like a memory, not of the mind, but of the skin. In the days that followed, he moved back in with his parents, settling for the awkward silence, the unspoken stares. Everything seemed normal, too normal. Until one night, as Nate was washing his hands in the bathroom, he sensed that smell, dampness, rot. The scent of rusted metal blended with the breath of decaying flesh. Not strong, not obvious, just faint, like a nightmare's whisper. And then, when he looked up at the mirror, something had just slipped out of the frame. A back, a pair of shoulders. Unclear. But there had been something there. Nate emptied his savings and moved to another town. Told no one. Took nothing but his phone and a cloth bag of clothes. He thought that would be enough to escape. The first night in his new apartment, Nate couldn't sleep. The room was clean, bright, and quiet. No creaking sounds, no basement, no Caleb. And then, at exactly 2:37 a.m., he heard knocking. Not loud, not rushed. Just 3 soft knocks coming from somewhere behind the bedroom wall. He sat up, listened. No more sounds. Probably a neighbor, or the plumbing, or his imagination. Nate lay back down, pulled the blanket up to his neck. But in the haze between sleep and waking, he thought he heard a sentence. Not quite a voice, not really words. Just a cold breath brushing past his ear, whispering, "You think you're gone?" The next morning, Nate inspected the entire apartment. Nothing out of place. Just one small detail made him pause. The doormat, which he had placed parallel to the tile edge the night before, was now slightly askew, tilted just a bit, as if someone had stood there for a long time, very still. He straightened it, said nothing, and kept on living. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, Nate still opens his eyes and looks toward the door, not because he's afraid, but because he's sure it will open again. The question is no longer when, but whether he'll have the courage to walk through when it calls his name one more time. Lucas moved into the apartment on a gloomy afternoon at the beginning of October, when the sky had the color of aged paper and the wind rustled through the trees like autumn's long sigh. He didn't choose that room. The room chose him. Or more accurately, the university's housing system paired him with a stranger, Derek. The name was printed on a piece of paper taped to the wooden brown door, accompanied by a simple note: biology major, senior year. Lucas read the name and felt nothing in particular. No sign, no omen that this place would leave a scar in his memory. Derek opened the door with a faint smile and dark brown eyes, warm like oak soaked in water too long. He was slim, polite, with the gentle manner of someone used to silence. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a small living room, and a modest kitchen. The walls were painted white but stained with patches of gray, as if the place itself had witnessed too many people come and go. Lucas was tired. He needed a quiet space, somewhere to focus on finishing his final paper, to forget the things that had fallen apart. At the time, Derek seemed like the perfect roommate, not noisy, not nosy, never intruding on personal space. And that too perfect nature was what slowly began to tip things sideways. Because sometimes, the people who ask nothing are the ones who observe the most. Lucas didn't know that on the first night, he drifted off to sleep in his new room. Lights off, curtains drawn. Derek was still standing behind the door, in the narrow hallway connecting the 2 bedrooms, silent, listening to the first breath of the newcomer. The first few weeks went by with an eerie calm. Derek played the role of the polite roommate to perfection, always washed his dishes after meals, always knocked before entering Lucas's room, always offered a faint smile whenever they crossed paths in the kitchen. Nothing unusual, and that in itself was what started to feel strange. Lucas often stayed up late studying. His room faced the parking lot, and light from a lamppost outside filtered through the blinds, casting long, wriggling streaks of light across the ceiling. In the early nights, he thought the footsteps in the hallway came from the upstairs neighbors. But then he started to realize those footsteps never faded. They always stopped right outside his door. At first, Lucas assumed Derek had a habit of pacing late at night, not uncommon. But then one night, at exactly 2:14 a.m., Lucas heard a knock, very soft, like someone gently tapping the wood with their fingertips. He opened the door. No one was there, just the dark hallway and the shadow of his own body stretching long across the wall. The next morning, he asked Derek if he had knocked on his door the night before. Derek looked up from his cereal bowl and smiled faintly. "Number I was asleep the whole time." Lucas nodded, but something in him settled, cold and uneasy. A chill was threading itself through his chest. In the days that followed, he began to pay closer attention. Some nights, when he pretended to be asleep, Lucas could hear the faint creak of the wooden floor, the sound of someone walking barefoot in the dark. He would lie still, eyes tightly shut, gripping the edge of his blanket. And then came the whisper, very soft, very close, almost right by his ear, though still from the hallway. Lucas. The voice wasn't male or female. No tone, no emotion. Just like a cold breeze slipping through the crack in the door. Lucas switched on the light and rushed out. The apartment was empty. Derek's room was dark. The door closed. He stood there, breathing hard, in silence. The next morning, he began placing a chair behind his bedroom door each night. And then, something else happened. Small. But to Lucas, it felt like a cold hand reaching through the mirror. His Netflix account had a movie listed under "Continue Watching," a movie he had never seen. Yet it showed 74% viewed. And strangest of all, at the beginning of the film, there was a character named Lucas. A joke? Something Derek added on purpose? He meant to ask, but somehow he didn't. Deep down, Lucas knew. There are some questions that, once asked, will never let life return to normal again. Lucas began to live in a state of constant alert. He no longer slept through the night, studied late, and barely left his room unless necessary. The air in the apartment grew thicker each day, as if an invisible film coated everything, muting even the light. Derek remained as polite as ever, but now his silence no longer felt comforting. It was more like a curtain, smooth, clean, but hiding something underneath that moved very slowly. One night, Lucas woke up to a strange sound. Not footsteps this time, but laughter. Very soft, very quiet. Laughter like someone seeing something truly funny, but trying not to let anyone know. He stepped out of his room and walked toward the living room. The apartment was dark, but from under Derek's door, a faint blue light was seeping through. A computer. Lucas bent down, quietly, like someone peeking into a prison cell. On the screen was some kind of photo library software. He saw thumbnails flashing by, his face, images of him sleeping, lying on his side, mouth open. Some photos were incredibly close. So close you could see each strand of hair, every tiny fold on the pillow. Lucas stepped back, didn't dare make a sound. The next morning, Derek didn't say a word. He ate cereal, read an article on his phone, and casually asked if Lucas wanted to watch a new horror movie that had just come out. Lucas shook his head. His hands were still trembling slightly. A week later, the chance came. Derek went out saying he had a group study session at the library. Lucas waited 10 minutes, then slid an old card into the lock on Derek's door. The room was dark, the windows shut, thick curtains drawn. It smelled of mildew and something like photo glue. In the corner, beneath the desk, Lucas found a black plastic box. Inside, dozens of photographs, all of them of him, sleeping, from different nights, different clothes, different angles. Some were taken from the side, some from directly above, as if a camera had been mounted on the ceiling. But that wasn't the part that made Lucas sick to his stomach. Mixed in were photos of another young man, not Lucas, but the angles, the perspective, the expression while sleeping. They were exactly like what Lucas had seen in the mirror. He didn't know who that person was. No name, no address. But one thing was certain. That person had been here, and possibly had once slept in the same bed Lucas now lay in. Lucas didn't take any of the photos from the box. He just stood there, heart pounding violently in his chest, as if it were trying to escape his body altogether. There was a faint voice in his head, no louder than a whisper. "Don't touch anything. He'll know." And indeed, just as he turned around to leave Derek's room, the light in the living room clicked on. Derek was standing there. No expression, no anger, no surprise, just watching. "Oh," he said, like someone catching a roommate rummaging through the fridge at night. "What are you looking for in my room?" Lucas stammered, unable to form words. In that moment, his mind was spinning through 100 scenarios. Run, scream, distract. But all of them jammed in his throat as if an invisible hand was tightening around his windpipe. Derek smiled, not moving closer. "The last guy used to go into my room too," he said with a slight shrug. "Used to sleepwalk a lot. Used to dream about being watched." Lucas said nothing. He backed away, slowly, like drifting backward out of a dream he didn't belong to. The next morning, he moved out. No notice to management. No goodbyes. He took nothing but his backpack and a spine-deep unease. No one called. Derek didn't ask. That apartment vanished from the map of his life like a dying ember swallowed by the night. A month later, Lucas received a package. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. In it, he was sleeping, mouth slightly open, pillow creased by damp hair. The room was not the old apartment, and not the place he was currently staying. It was somewhere he'd never been, or somewhere he hadn't yet remembered being. Mira arrived in Raven Hollow on an afternoon as gray as crumpled paper. The sky folded and tossed across the distant pine forest like someone had crumpled it in frustration. She had just landed her first post-college job, a design assistant at a small tech company nestled in a town hardly anyone had heard of. With little savings and a recklessly determined spirit, she needed a place to stay immediately. The roommate had popped up in a local Facebook group. No photos, just a few short lines. Private room and cabin near forest. Cheap, quiet, female preferred. Contact, Graham. She messaged, not expecting much. But Graham replied almost instantly. He said the house had been passed down from his family, was spacious, had extra rooms, and that he valued peace and quiet. His voice over the phone was warm and low, occasionally drifting off like someone lost in a distant memory. Graham met her on the porch the next day. He was shorter than she expected, mid-30s maybe, ash-colored hair, and eyes so pale they almost lacked pupils. The way he spoke made Mira feel safe, or at least not threatened. And sometimes, in moments of desperation, that alone is enough to make someone trust. The cabin sat halfway up the forested slope, weathered gray by rain and time. Mira's room was small but clean, with a window overlooking the pines. There was just one thing that made her hesitate. The door lock was an old twist knob, no key. She asked, "Can it be changed?" Graham smiled. "Nothing's ever locked out here. People don't do bad things here." Mira gave a small laugh, saying nothing. But in that moment, something tiny, like a single drop of cold water down her neck, slid along her spine. In the early days, Mira began to believe she might have found the right place. At night, the cabin was so quiet that she could hear the snow falling on the roof. Graham was reserved, sometimes absent-minded, but maintained the polite boundaries expected between two strangers sharing a house. He didn't enter her room, didn't disturb her late at night, and somehow always showed up at just the right moment when Mira needed help. Fixing a water valve, repairing a light cord, even carrying a heavy bag of groceries. The problem only started with how perfectly timed those moments were. One evening, Mira returned home after work, twilight already settling in. As she stepped into the hallway, Graham was just coming up from the kitchen, holding a cup of hot tea. Not for himself, but exactly the kind she usually drank. He smiled and handed it to her, as if he'd already counted each of her footsteps on the walk home. "You look cold," he said, his voice light as powdered snow. She forced a smile and accepted the tea. But something began to take root inside her. A quiet, nameless unease. That feeling grew with the smallest details. One Tuesday morning, Mira discovered her favorite pair of underwear missing from the drawer. She had washed it, dried it, folded it, and placed it in the usual spot. It couldn't have been misplaced. It couldn't have fallen. She turned the whole room upside down, checked under pillows, pulled out drawers, even searched the trash. Nothing. The next day, the nightgown she kept in the closet had been folded differently, still hers, but not the way she usually folded it. Mira started to feel she was living in a different kind of silence now. A silence that was intentional. Graham said nothing, asked nothing. But his eyes, once a source of comfort, now felt like surgical lights, exposing her to the bone. She decided to buy a new door lock, a keyed doorknob set she could install herself in under 30 minutes. One afternoon, while Graham was out, Mira replaced the lock with her own hands, tightening each screw with sweat-soaked palms. That night, she slept a little better. No dreams, no creaking floorboards, no sense of someone standing outside her door. At least until 1:28 a.m., Mira jolted awake. There was a knock, 3 soft taps, then a voice. "Mira?" "Graham." His voice wasn't loud, wasn't angry. It was sweet, like poisoned honey. She held her breath, didn't reply, didn't move. Outside, the voice continued. "Why'd you lock the door? Don't you trust me?" Moments later, the footsteps retreated, soft and slow. But Mira didn't sleep again that night, because in the silence that followed, she heard breathing. Right at the crack beneath the door, the next morning, Mira quietly changed the lock back to the old one. Not because Graham asked her to, but because she saw the expression on his face when he noticed the new handle. Not anger, not surprise, but hurt, a kind of wounded confusion, as if her locking the door had been the final proof that he was no longer trusted. Graham said nothing about it. But from that day on, the atmosphere in the house shifted. At every dinner, his gaze lingered on her wrist a bit too long. Each time she said she needed to sleep early, he nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. One afternoon, while Graham was out buying groceries, there was a knock at the door. Mira opened it and froze. Standing before her was a woman in her early 30s, face weary, eyes haunted yet steady. "You live with Graham?" Her voice was quiet but firm. "Yes. Is something wrong?" The woman was silent for a moment, then spoke quickly as if rehearsed. "I used to rent a room here before you, and I just came to tell you, you should leave. Graham's been accused of harassment, of stalking women. There are at least 3 restraining orders against him. I know. I'm one of the 3. Mira's body went rigid, her throat dry. "I don't know how he hasn't been arrested yet," the woman continued. "He always acts normal, kind at first, but eventually you'll wake up and find him standing in your room, and he'll smile and ask what you dreamed about." That night, Mira began packing. She didn't hesitate. No more doubt. Everything was now too clear. She loaded a few things into her car, planning to leave the next morning. But then, Graham came home earlier than usual. She received a message. "Where are you planning to go?" A few minutes later, he knocked on her door. "Mira, did someone come talk to you?" His voice was like still lake water, calm, but missing a heartbeat. "No one," Mira replied, trying to keep her tone steady. "Really? Just wondering. You've been acting a little strange lately." Then he walked away quietly. She exhaled, thinking she had just avoided something. But that night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., Mira woke up again because someone was sitting at the foot of her bed. No footsteps, no door opening. Graham. He turned to look at her, eyes gleaming with something so gentle it was terrifying. "I know you're planning to leave, but you don't have to run like the others." Mira pressed herself against the wall. "Don't be scared," he whispered. "I just want us to say goodbye in the most beautiful way." Then he touched her leg. Mira didn't scream, not because she didn't want to, but because the moment Graham touched her leg, that silent kind of fear flooded her lungs like ice water. She kicked him hard, broke free from the bed, and bolted for the door, her heart pounding like a trapped mouse inside her chest. Graham didn't chase, didn't call out. He just sat there, watching her flee with a distant gaze, as if this were only a dream he'd had many times before. Mira ran out onto the road and dialed 911 with trembling hands. The police arrived within 15 minutes. But during those 15 minutes, she stood in the cold night air, surrounded by wind rushing through the forest, wondering whether she was still sane. Graham was escorted from the house. He denied everything, from entering her room to laying a hand on her. "I just saw her door open," he said. "I was worried about her." The police found no concrete evidence, no cameras, no clear trace. But in the end, under the weight of Mira's statement and another woman's, Graham was forced to leave town. Mira moved out the following week. A new city, a new apartment, sturdy locks, no strangers. Everything seemed to be over. But one night, when she opened her mailbox, there was a small package, no return address. Inside was a key, old, scratched. On the metal, traces of worn silver paint still clung. Tucked beside it was a blank piece of paper, just one line written in water-smudged ink. "I couldn't get in that night, but I still remember the smell of your hair." There are summers you'll remember for the rest of your life, not for their joy, but because they awakened a fear within you that nothing can ever extinguish. That summer, Ryan had just turned 16. He was invited to Charles's swampside mansion, a close friend since elementary school. The house sat quietly on the edge of a narrow canal on Long Beach Island, backed by water as smooth as glass and fronted by a sandy trail. Charles, Ryan, and Riley, the inseparable trio, planned a weekend without adults, without limits. Riley had just gotten his driver's license, Charles had his own house, and Ryan brought enough weed for all three, along with a few bottles of liquor sneaked from his parents' cabinet. The sun blazed brightly. Sea breezes swept across the water, creating ripples that reflected the sunlight like traps for the eyes. The two-story white house had a back balcony leading straight to an old wooden dock. A spiral staircase descended from the balcony to the ground, and a sliding glass door faced the swamp. From morning till afternoon, they cleaned rooms, arranged sleeping spots, and searched for familiar girls from social media nearby. Fortunately, 3 agreed to come over: Rosie, Alexa, and Sophie. They met in the evening, soft music playing from a Bluetooth speaker, yellow light casting from the small pool behind the house. They drank, joked, and played in the warm water. Everything seemed perfect, a true summer night where all boundaries blurred. Ryan vividly remembered looking up at the sky, the wind brushing through his hair, the warmth rising from the water, and the exchanged glances in the dim light. No one knew that from across the water, where it seemed empty, another pair of eyes was watching them. Music still softly played from the speaker by the pool steps. Steam mingled with the thin smoke of marijuana. Most of the house lights were off, leaving only the gentle honey-like glow from the backyard, casting a warm mist over their skin. Ryan was chatting with Sophie when he noticed Charles, sitting at the pool's edge, suddenly go silent. Not just stop talking. He froze. Charles's gaze wasn't directed at anyone but pierced through Ryan, fixed on the opposite side of the swamp. Ryan turned reflexively. Across the water was a row of houses facing the canal. The vacation homes were silent, dark, as if the owners had been away for days. "What's wrong?" Rosie asked, her voice tinged with concern. Charles didn't answer immediately. Then he spoke, very softly, as if afraid of his own voice. "I saw someone standing at the dock over there." Ryan squinted. The distance wasn't close, but not too far either. He saw a faint shadow. It could be trees, or it could be a person. But Charles shook his head. "That house belongs to my uncle. That family is in Florida. I'm sure no one's there." At that moment, the music stopped. No one remembered who turned it off. Only the silence thickened like a veil over everything. Sophie stood up, wrapping a towel around herself. "Let's go inside," she said, and no one objected. They left the pool quietly, no more joking. As they dried off, Riley, the loudest of the group, suddenly cursed. Everyone turned. Riley was staring intently at the swamp, and this time, no one could deny what they saw. Under the faint light from the road across the water, 4 figures, tall, thin, motionless, stood right at the edge of the dock. They did nothing. No waving, no movement. They just stood there. And clearly, they were looking straight at them. "Inside," Charles said, his voice breaking, hand already on the sliding glass door handle. The group hurried after him. Wet footsteps slapped against the wooden floor, echoing urgently like war drums. Riley locked the sliding door behind them. Someone pulled the curtains. No one argued, no one questioned. Ryan pulled out his phone, but his hands trembled so much he couldn't unlock the screen. Outside, the swamp remained silent. No swimming sounds, no splashing. But then, splash, 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 splash. 4 dry, metallic sounds echoed. The sound of metal, as if someone, or something, had just jumped into the water. Not hurried, not rushed, just deliberate. "They're swimming over," Fran whispered. That statement cut through the thick air like a knife. The group jumped up. Riley ran to the front door, locking it tight. Charles ran upstairs to check the 2nd floor balcony door. "The upstairs door is open," he shouted down. "Did anyone lock it?" Silence. No one remembered locking the back balcony door. No one was sure if anyone had ever cared about it. And then, as if fate had been waiting for that moment, light footsteps echoed from upstairs. Not fast, not heavy. Just a steady, cautious sound, like someone feeling their way through an unfamiliar house. Those footsteps shouldn't exist. None of them were upstairs. "Run!" Charles shouted. They didn't wait for a second command. The group bolted out the front door, carrying nothing. Not phones, not wallets, not belongings. Riley started the car with trembling hands, driving across the lawn, smashing through Charles's family mailbox. No one dared look back. They only knew that behind them, the door remained open. And in that darkness, something had crossed the threshold, entered the house that had once been the safest place of their youth. When the police arrived, the house was silent again, as if nothing had happened. No doors were broken, no clear signs. Only the upstairs was ransacked, drawers empty, belongings vanished. But what left Charles speechless was the absence of the Boston whaler, the family boat always moored at the dock. The boat couldn't disappear without the key, and only one person knew. Charles's father hid the key under a small storage compartment beneath the steering wheel, inside the dock. The police said there were no cameras, no clues, no reason to believe this was anything more than a burglary. They didn't understand. because those intruders didn't just take things. They entered the house silently, like a breeze, and left something far more terrifying, a feeling of violation to the core. Charles, Riley, and Ryan left LBY the very next day. None of them returned to that mansion for years. Ryan recounted this story only once, on a rainy night, his eyes distant as if still seeing those 4 dark figures standing on the dock. He said, "They didn't look human. They knew who we were. They weren't in a hurry, because they knew one day someone would come back." Since then, every night before bed, Ryan always locks the balcony door twice. Not because he feared burglars, but because he believed some entities don't break doors, don't smash locks. They don't need to. They just need to know the code. Jake had spent his entire life by the sea. Not the bustling tourist beaches filled with sunscreen scents and noisy chatter, but a small coastal town where every sound was steeped in salt and the wind could remind you of childhood with just a sudden chill brushing your neck. Here, people didn't need to see faces to know who was entering the grocery store. Sandy toes, worn-out surfboards, and the sound of wind chimes on the porch. These were the familiar symphony of the land Jake called home. To him, the sea wasn't a place to come and go. It was a friend, a teacher, a mirror reflecting unnamed fears and dreams. Armin and Chuck were indispensable pieces of those days. From after-school escapades, laughter in the rain, to the first time sneaking a smoke on the warehouse roof, they were 3 young souls living for long afternoons on the sand and nights where no one asked, "Are you going home yet?" On an early summer Saturday night, without much discussion, they decided to call Fran and Sophia, 2 girls from the same school, close enough to trust, distant enough to make things interesting. The plan was simple: wine, blankets, a far-off beach, and a sky unspoiled by city lights. Jake drove. The old silver sedan hummed like an old beast familiar with the road. They passed through residential areas, leaving behind the bright and noisy boardwalk lights, traversing a thin mist draped across the road like a velvet curtain hiding something waiting. When the sandy beach appeared, stretching, empty, without a single footprint, Jake felt as if they were the first to set foot here after a great flood. The night sky was silent. The waves lapped like a steady, harmless heartbeat. They spread blankets on a high patch of sand, popped open the wine, and let laughter drift with the sea breeze. Fran whispered about scholarships, Chuck cracked jokes with absurd stories, and Armin took the chance to get closer to Fran each time he poured more wine. Jake glanced at Sophia, the yellow light from the car softly illuminating her face, making it seem like it was glowing from within. A strange moment passed between them, a fragile peace, as if it shouldn't be touched. But then, something brushed lightly against Jake's neck. Not wind, not blowing sand. It was a feeling, as if being watched, unclear from where, unclear since when. He turned his head. Nothing. Only the sea, darkness, and a wave sound that seemed slower than usual. They separated not due to arguments or disagreements, but simply the instinct to have some quiet space in a vast and too quiet place. Armin and Fran walked eastward, their laughter fading into the thin mist. Jake and Sophia went the opposite way, bare feet sinking into the cold sand, saying nothing, as if speaking would shatter something hovering in the air. The sea at night wasn't like the daytime sea. It was no longer a place of sunlight and play, but became an observing entity, breathing slowly, patiently, and seemingly always aware of your every move. The 2 sat down on a high dune, the blanket spread out like a small nest amidst the black ocean. Above them, the sky seemed to dip, stars denser than any illustration. Jake lay on his back, eyes upward, feeling strangely small, as if being weighed, assessed by nameless things. Sophia leaned on her elbow, hair blown to one side by the wind. She silently looked at him for a long time, then softly asked, "Do you hear something?" The question made Jake sit up. He listened. At first, only the sound of waves, the wind. But then, a very faint, steady sound like a mosquito's buzz, but more metallic, more mechanical. It resembled the sound you hear in a gym when fluorescent lights hum, or an old fan about to break. Not natural. And worse, it was moving. "Maybe it's the wind," Jake whispered, but he didn't believe it himself. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried something unnameable, a formless presence yet very specific. It seemed to circle them, getting clearer, then vanished. Sophia curled up. "I don't like that sound." Jake looked around, only seeing thick darkness. The flashlight was in the car. Everything around seemed to swallow the light. He reached out to hug Sophia's shoulder, trying to calm her. Then Sophia froze. Her eyes widened, unblinking. "There's something above us." Jake immediately looked up. Above, where the sky should only have stars, there was a small pale blue light hovering, not blinking, not flickering, no sound, but still, present. A drone. Unknown origin. Unknown arrival time. It hovered, like an eye recording, like a truth waiting to be used. Jake stood up abruptly, eyes fixed on the object. It did nothing, just hovered, as if it knew it didn't need to hurry. Sophia began to cry, not loudly, not screaming, just sobs, the sound humans make when realizing they've been watched too long without knowing. Jake pulled his jacket over her, and in that brief moment, he felt he was no longer in control. He was a character, pre-written in a script where the sole viewer was that drone. The drone disappeared strangely, not soaring up, not flying away, but just fading into the darkness as if it never existed. But the feeling of being watched didn't vanish. It lingered like a pungent smell clinging to your clothes after leaving a cramped, suffocating place. Jake and Sophia returned to the car. On the way, they said nothing. The laughter had vanished like footprints erased by waves. Armin and Fran were already waiting, leaning against the car. They also seemed different, maybe due to the cold, maybe due to something unspoken. Jake briefly mentioned the drone. No one asked further. Fran just silently looked toward the sea, eyes distant as if recounting stolen private moments. The car shook slightly as Jake inserted the key. The engine sound in the night felt too loud for the overly quiet scene. They left the beach, but the cold didn't stay behind. It followed them through every turn, every dark stretch of road. When the car stopped in front of Chuck's house, everyone got out except Jake. He said he needed a minute to think it all over, but actually, it was to breathe. Jake rested his forehead on the steering wheel, eyes closed. 1 minute. Just 1 minute to feel safe. But when he turned on his phone, the world cracked in a way he couldn't mend. On the screen was a notification. AirTag found moving with you. Jake sat still. His heart pounded so hard the steering wheel seemed to vibrate. He stared at the message, hoping it would disappear if he looked long enough. But it remained. A tracking device. Someone had attached it to his car. Jake jumped out of the seat, opened all doors, and shone the flashlight throughout the car. Nothing in the trunk, nothing under the floor, nothing under the seats. But then he bent down, shone into the front left wheel well, and saw it. A small round object, glinting with cold metal, was carefully taped with black duct tape. Hard to detect, unless you knew what to look for. Jake picked it up. His hands trembled so much that he nearly dropped them. The feeling wasn't fear, it was the realization. You're no longer the protagonist in your life. You're a puppet, a target. He threw it onto the road, stomped on it repeatedly until only tiny plastic shards remained. But relief didn't come. Because Jake knew the one controlling that drone was watching them, not out of curiosity, but for some unrevealed reason. And worst, he knew where they were. Right now, Jake burst into Chuck's house like someone who had just escaped an accident but wasn't sure if he was still alive. In his hand were the broken plastic pieces, evidence of something none in the group was truly ready to face. They gathered in the living room, sitting around the dim light. No one dared to turn on bright lights. No one dared to approach the windows. Jake placed the AirTag fragments on the table as if it were the heart of a creature they had just killed. But that thing had no blood, no sound, only a persistent presence, like a whispering voice in the head, repeating, "You thought you were alone." Sophia opened her phone. The screen displayed the same message. AirTag found moving with you. Fran 2. Chuck, the homeowner, seemingly unrelated, now became the destination of an invisible stalker. The group retreated to the basement, locked all doors, drew curtains, and turned off phones. Every small noise from upstairs startled them. No one slept. Only breaths and fearful glances silently passed in the dark. They spent the night in the basement like those awaiting judgment. And then, as if something changed when the sun rose. The next morning, everything was silent. No strangers, no threats, no more messages. A week later, Jake thought it was over until Chuck called. His voice was urgent, panicked. When Jake arrived, Chuck said nothing, just handed him a stack of papers, photos, blurry pictures, printed with a cheap printer. But in them, Jake saw himself and Sophia on the beach that night. Private moments, expressions that should have belonged only to the two, now became collages for someone behind the lens who never revealed themselves. They reported it to the police, but no traces, no fingerprints, no clues, no laws for those who don't need to touch victims to destroy them. Since that day, Sophia no longer looked at Jake the same way. She became distant, cold, as if all the beautiful things they once had were captured and held hostage forever. Jake still lived, but after that night, whenever he heard a faint buzzing in the air, from a fan, a fly, or just the vague sound of wind, he paused. Not because he thought he was being watched, but because he knew. There was a time he was watching, and no one realized until it was too late. Some summers leave the scent of sunlight on your skin. Some summers are memories of laughter and warm embraces after sunset. But some summers leave something smoldering, like a tiny shard of metal embedded in your mind, cold, hard, and never disappearing. That was the summer when Ryan was 16. For the first time, he tasted unbridled freedom. No parents, no alarm clocks, no rules. Just a white villa nestled by a tranquil marsh on Long Beach Island, a place where, if you stood still long enough, you could hear the water breathe. The house belonged to Charles's family, Ryan's best friend since elementary school. Charles was the calm type, unassuming but always able to make things go smoothly. Riley was the third piece of the trio, impulsive, quick-witted, newly licensed, and not afraid to drive recklessly. They brought along marijuana, a few bottles of hard liquor borrowed from home, and the naive belief that a weekend without adults would be paradise. The villa sat at the end of a white sand road. The front faced a row of small trees, while the back, where the strange events began, opened to an old wooden dock stretching into mirror-like water. A spacious balcony connected to a spiral metal staircase leading down to the backyard, where the dim yellow lights of the pool awaited their unforgettable evening. From the moment they stepped in, Ryan felt something incomplete. Not bad, just too quiet. As if everything in the house was waiting for them, but not to welcome. By afternoon, they were browsing the internet, texting a few girls who were also on the island. Within an hour, 3 names agreed to come over. Rosie, open and cheerful. Alexa, a bit aloof but likable. And Sophie, quiet, with eyes that seemed to look through people. Evening fell like a warm velvet blanket. They played soft jazz, the yellow lights reflecting off the pool's surface. The alcohol gradually infused their conversations, and the smiles grew wider, voices louder, clothes fewer. Ryan sat at the pool's edge, eyes lifted to the starry sky, feeling everything was right. Right place, right time, the right people. But when everything feels too right, it's often fragile, because perfection rarely lasts. From across the marsh, where there were no lights, no movement, something shifted, very slightly, very silently, as if it had been standing there before they arrived. And now, it simply began to watch. The laughter persisted. The glasses remained full. Everything seemed like a typical teenage party. A bit of booze, some smoke, a few suggestive glances. But none of the 6 present noticed. The atmosphere had changed. Only Charles did. He was the first to fall silent, turning his face toward the dock and staring into the darkness across the marsh. Unblinking, motionless. His gaze was taut like a drawn string. Ryan noticed the change. "What's wrong?" he asked softly, as if afraid to shatter something delicate in the night. Charles didn't turn back, only spoke loud enough to be heard. "Someone is standing on the opposite dock." The group fell silent for a few seconds. Rosie forced a laugh. "Probably a neighbor out for a walk." Charles shook his head. "Number that house belongs to my uncle. They're in Florida all week. No one's there." Silence began to spread like ink soaking into paper. Ryan frowned, straining his eyes to look into the distance. Faintly illuminated by a distant streetlight was a shadow, indistinct, unidentifiable, but standing opposite them. Sophie clutched the towel around her. "Let's go inside," she whispered. And this time no one objected. They quickly left the pool, drying off hastily. Riley locked the sliding door. Charles drew the balcony curtains. They said nothing more about the shadow, because speaking of it was admitting it was real. But silence couldn't hide what they didn't want to see. As they entered the living room, Riley, usually the most optimistic, suddenly cursed. He stood by the glass door, his hand trembling as he pointed toward the marsh. They looked. Under the faint light, 4 figures, tall, thin, motionless, stood on the opposite dock. Each silhouette seemed cut from the night, featureless, faceless, just solid black forms facing them. No movement, no sound, just standing there. "Get inside now," Charles said, his voice revealing genuine fear for the first time. The sliding door was locked, and most of the house lights were turned off. They huddled in a windowless room where light couldn't escape and gazes couldn't penetrate. But then, click, 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 click. 4 sounds echoed from the marsh, not loud, but chillingly clear. Ryan froze. His heart sank. They just jumped into the water. No one needed to ask further. They knew. Something was swimming toward them. "They're swimming over," Rosie whispered, her voice so faint it seemed even she doubted she spoke. No one reacted for several seconds, as if the entire house, time and the heartbeats of the 6 were suspended in the damp, cold air. Then, as if an unspoken command had been given, everyone moved. Charles dashed to the front door, fumbling with the lock with trembling hands. Riley searched for anything to barricade the door. Ryan sprinted upstairs, 2 steps at a time, heart pounding in his ears. The second floor was dim. Darkness enveloped everything unnaturally, as if the house's electricity had never been sufficient to repel whatever lurked beyond the walls. The glass door leading to the balcony was open. Ryan stood frozen, not out of surprise, but because the confirmation chilled him. Someone had entered through here. Or was he standing just outside, yet to come in? No wind, no water sounds, no noise from the marsh, but silence was a sound. Then, downstairs, a noise echoed, not loud, but unmistakable. Creak, like old floorboards under a heavy footstep, slowly. One step, then another. Not a mouse, not an echo. Footsteps, moving inside the house. Sophie noticed first. She grabbed Fran's hand, eyes wide, repeating incoherently, "It's in the house. It's in the house." Riley muttered curses, pulling an old golf club from a corner. Charles held a table lamp, its cord dangling. No one knew what to do. No one was taught how to confront things that entered without opening doors. "Into the living room. Lock the door. Don't separate," Charles ordered. They rushed in. The wooden door slammed behind them, the bolt clicking like a signal for impending panic. They huddled in the darkness, breathing heavily. Ryan tried to see everyone through the faint glow of his phone screen, lips trembling, cold sweat down his spine. And then, thud, a heavy sound from upstairs, as if someone, or something, had just jumped onto the floor from a moderate height. No one moved. They sat frozen. Thud, thud, footsteps. Very slow, very deliberate, not hasty, not rushed, as if it were savoring every moment of stalking its prey. Alexa began to cry. Ryan grabbed her hand, not to comfort, but because he was about to collapse himself. Then, a clicking sound. The living room door handle turned slightly but didn't open. Someone knew how to turn it, but not strong enough, or not needing to open it fully. Charles whispered through choked breath, "Run! Now don't look back." The door burst open. No one dared glance behind. They bolted out, knocking over a chair, hitting walls, stumbling, then getting up to continue running. Riley opened the front door, sprinted into the yard like mad, pressing the car key repeatedly until the lights flashed like salvation. No sounds from behind, no pursuit, no screams, only heartbeats, and the feeling. They didn't need to chase, because they knew. Next time, the police arrived within an hour after Ryan and his friends called. They returned to the villa near dawn, flashlights in hand, notebooks ready, still carrying the attitude of those who believed it was just a typical break-in. No doors were broken, no signs of struggle. Only the second floor was ransacked. Closets, drawers, bookshelves, all valuables were gone. But what nearly broke Charles wasn't the loss of items. The Boston whaler, his family's beloved boat, was also missing. It couldn't have left on its own, and there was only one key, hidden carefully in a secret compartment under the steering wheel, known only to Charles and his father. One officer merely shrugged. Maybe someone who used to be here, someone who knew where things were hidden. But Ryan couldn't accept such a simple explanation, because he remembered every gaze, every footstep, every click as the 4 dark figures jumped into the water simultaneously, unhurriedly. None of them ever saw those entities' faces, didn't know their motives. No credit cards were stolen, no threats made. But they were watched, invaded, and chosen. After that night, Riley never slept on the second floor again. Charles moved away after a year. Ryan, who who seemed least affected, became the one who always triple-locked every door, even during the day. They never recounted the event to anyone else, but whenever they mentioned it, all three agreed. It wasn't just a break-in, it was a reminder of things that don't need to break doors, leave footprints, or make noise. They only need to know exactly who you are and know the code to the house you once called safe. The 17-year-old boy, an avid gamer from Chandler, Arizona, once believed that his small room on the second floor was the safest place in the world. As the scorching summer sun seeped through every crevice, he sought refuge in the world of Call of Duty Black Ops, where the sounds of gunfire and teammates echoed through the darkness, helping him forget the oppressive heat outside. It was a Friday night, and the city had settled into silence, leaving only the distant chirping of cicadas and the dim glow of streetlights under a hazy sky. He had no idea that tonight, the shadowy figure wouldn't just be part of a game. It would infiltrate reality into every breath, every dark corner of the house he called his haven. The room was illuminated by the cold blue light from the computer screen. His Logitech noise-canceling headphones were snug around his head, blocking out all external sounds, leaving only gunfire and teammates' voices. He was immersed in each battle, forgetting everything around him. Friends on Discord called his name, urging one more match, amidst laughter and the cacophony of gunfire. Then, suddenly, not from the game but from reality, a different sound emerged. It wasn't background music or familiar footsteps in the house. A heavy, resounding thump echoed from the floor above. He looked up, frowning. The headphones still covered his ears, but that sound couldn't be blocked. It was distinct, strange, and ominous, like a warning from the darkness. He stood up, slowly stepping away from his swivel chair, a cold shiver running down his spine. The cool night air drifted in through the slightly open window, but there was no one else in the house, or at least that's what he thought. He walked to the kitchen, where the dim yellow light cast shadows over a steaming bowl of noodles. Placing it on the table, he turned his gaze toward the staircase, the source of the thump. Each echo felt like the heartbeat of an invisible monster waiting. For a moment, everything became terrifyingly silent. The game's sounds, his friends' voices, all faded, giving way to a paralyzing loneliness. He couldn't explain the rising fear, a feeling of wanting to search yet also to hide. His trembling hand reached for the front door lock. For the first time in his life, he felt the need to lock every door. A small action, but a significant sign of silent panic. His footsteps were gentle, cautious on the cold wooden floor. The house suddenly felt too vast, too quiet, as if it were swallowing him whole. When he entered the room and turned on the light, everything appeared as before: keyboard, mouse, computer screen glowing faintly blue. But the air, it had changed. A chilling breeze blew through, as if an invisible breath was on his neck. The room was no longer a sanctuary, but a deadly trap, where he couldn't distinguish between reality and illusion. And he knew he wasn't playing a game anymore, but was part of a different script, written by the darkness, just beginning. That thump was no longer a simple anomaly. It had become a bizarre rhythm, echoing in his mind, each beat like a knock from another world, one not belonging to humans. He stood before the pitch-black hallway, where the light from his room barely reached. The bedroom door was ajar, and beyond it was a void of complete darkness, impenetrable by any light. It felt like a vacuum absorbing light, as if something was waiting beyond. With each passing second, he sensed something. Not a gaze, but a feeling, a presence observing, silent yet intense. He recalled his mother's words from childhood. If something feels wrong, trust your instincts. He hurriedly closed the door, but not fast enough. A creaking sound came from the door's edge. Someone had touched it. An invisible hand or a figure hiding in the shadows. His heart pounded, hands trembling as he grabbed his phone, intending to text Johnny, his gaming friend, the only person he trusted at that moment. But the call notification indicated Johnny had temporarily left the party, leaving behind a threatening solitude. The room's light dimmed with his rapid breathing. He looked around, each elongated shadow on the wall seeming to move, spiraling into his mind. He removed his headphones, focusing on every small sound in the house. Then, footsteps. Not just simple thumps anymore, but real footsteps, slow, heavy, approaching his room. He held his breath, quietly retreating to his desk. The keyboard and screen vibrated slightly as he sat uneasily. Thoughts flooded his mind. If it's an intruder, what's the purpose? Why me? A long shadow flickered in his peripheral vision, like something standing there, waiting to reveal itself. He slightly opened his room door, peeking into the hallway. No one. But at that moment, a sigh escaped from the void, chilling to the bone. Unable to wait any longer, he quickly returned to his room, locking the door. His heart pounded as if it would burst, hands trembling as he searched for an emergency call. But the signal was too weak to make a call. He told himself, "I must stay calm. I can't let myself be defeated by a ghost." But deep down, he knew. That ghost wasn't just imagination. It had entered his life. And tonight, he was no longer alone. He hadn't yet recovered when a horrifying scene unfolded before him. Through the slightly open bedroom door, he turned to see a figure, a strange man sitting upright on the bed he slept in every night. The man's hands rested on his thighs, his posture stiff like a living statue. He said nothing, but his face twisted into a bizarre smile, eyes cold and dark, as if savoring his fear. His heartbeat quickened, a scream caught in his throat. "What do you want?" The man responded with a broader smile, revealing white teeth in the darkness. That laugh wasn't human. It was a mocking, insane, sinister sound. He jumped up, scrambling onto the desk, knocking over the computer screen and surrounding items. Everything crashed, sounds echoing, but he was too panicked to care. Running out of the room, he gasped, looking back to see the man standing, slowly stepping through the doorway with a challenging gait. "Let me play," the man stammered, his voice broken, like a madman. He dashed down the stairs, fumbling with his phone and a kitchen knife, the only potential weapon in that desperate moment. The man followed, each footstep resounding like a verdict. He screamed for 911, his voice trembling but determined. The wooden stairs creaked as he ran, the man's footsteps unrelenting. Then, in a moment, the man stopped at the kitchen door, staring directly at him. His bloodshot eyes seemed to contain endless darkness. Then he turned, exiting through the front door he had forgotten to lock. He rushed to slam the door shut, locking it for the second time in his life. His heart still pounded, breaths rapid and unceasing. He couldn't believe he had just escaped the grasp of someone he had never seen before. When he called his parents, they were terrified, but tried to reassure him, advising him to check every room for any missing items. He inspected each room, every corner, finding nothing disturbed, but the unease clung to his mind. The man's gaze on the small bed, that grotesque smile, and the insane laughter, all felt like an inescapable nightmare. He knew one thing clearly: this wasn't a coincidence. The man had chosen him. And that night, his life changed forever. The next day, as the morning light quietly filtered through the curtains, he still couldn't shake the chills from the previous night. Everything in the house remained unchanged, no signs of forced entry, nothing missing. But inside him, a vast emptiness and unspoken fear had taken root. He called his mother, recounting every horrifying detail. Her voice was initially worried, then turned to intense anger. His father also called, instructing him to be cautious and check every nook and cranny of the house. They told him to lock the doors, not allowing any strangers in. But he knew locking the doors wasn't enough. The strange man's eyes and eerie smile haunted him. The man didn't need to take anything. Just being there, just standing, created a fear so profound it altered his life. That night he lay in his room, lights fully on, afraid to close his eyes. The darkness in the hallway still lingered, lurking between the flickering lights. He tried to convince himself it was just an illusion, a result of a sleepless night. But when he saw the slightly ajar door he had left open, his heart sank. He suddenly realized the darkness had never left. It was still there, silent and waiting. The story doesn't end here. It's only the beginning. He knew one day that figure might return, not just as a ghost, but as a nightmare stepping out of the virtual world directly into reality. And the most terrifying part, he didn't know if he was ready to face it. Have you ever wondered if, in the vast world of the internet, where everything can be fake and anonymous, a real connection could exist? An invisible thread pulling two strangers closer than even the people they know in real life? Someone you could confide in with your deepest thoughts, secrets you never dared share with anyone else? The 13-year-old boy in this story believed it was possible. In the virtual world of the MMO game Ganu, he found a special friend, a girl who went by the nickname Medusa. She didn't just appear during raids or online quests. She was the first person who made him feel less alone. Every time he logged in, he knew Medusa would be there, waiting, talking, sharing, and listening. Long messages and voice chats gradually built a strange closeness. They weren't just in-game teammates. They were kindred spirits sharing their most private thoughts. Medusa knew his age, his hometown, and even personal details about his family. He opened up to her, something he had never done with anyone in real life. For a boy overwhelmed with new emotions, experiencing love and longing for the first time, Medusa felt like the closest friend, a beloved presence in a world full of cold avatars. He wondered, could this ever become real? Could they meet outside the screen, in the real world? She said she was ready, promised she'd come visit him. That promise felt like a ray of light in his tiny world, filling him with hope and dreams. He began preparing, cleaning his room, and convincing his older brother to go out so he could have the space to himself. But deep inside, a strange feeling crept in, as if something wasn't right, as if there was a secret hidden behind the name Medusa. And then the dreams of that meeting began to darken. The day of the meeting approached, and the 13-year-old boy couldn't sit still. Every passing minute made his heart race faster, as if he were awaiting a miracle. He imagined the moment he'd open the door and see Medusa, the mysterious friend who had shared so many of his hopes and secrets. His older brother, the only other person home that night, had been convinced to go hang out with his friends so he could have the house to himself. The boy cleaned his room meticulously, arranging every item with a care that no one would expect from a child. But the unease wasn't just excitement. It was a vague premonition, a chill that ran down his spine, like something was lurking, silently watching his every move. As darkness fell, his phone buzzed with a message. "I'm here." The boy rushed to the front door, heart pounding out of his chest. But when he looked through the window, there was no one there. He replied, "I don't see anyone." The next message came, "Wait a bit, I went to the wrong house." But there was only one house, and the door was locked. He stood there, confused, eyes fixed on his phone as his heart raced. The silence around him was terrifying. He waited while the sense of danger grew steadily. Not long after, the doorbell rang, again and again. He rushed over, peeked through the peephole, and what he saw froze him in place. A short, balding man with cold eyes and an awkward smile stood there, claiming to be Medusa. The boy's heart stopped for several seconds. The ringing continued, the knocks relentless and urgent. In a panic, he backed away, locked the door tight, and ran to his room, hands shaking as he dialed his brother. This wasn't the friend he had imagined. This was a shadow from the real world, a nightmare hiding behind a virtual screen. Though the door was locked tight, the pounding didn't stop, like hammers striking the boy's chest. These weren't the knocks of a friend, but silent threats, unspoken warnings. The darkness outside was pushing its way into their peaceful home. The boy, terrified, ran to his room and locked the door, his heart thudding in his chest. His hands shook as he called his brother. The phone rang, and finally, he picked up. "Come home now. There's a man outside saying he's Medusa, but he's not her. You have to come now," he shouted into the phone. His brother told him to stay calm and promised to return as fast as he could. But the stranger didn't stay by the front door. The room light flickered dimly, and the short figure was visible through the window. He began tapping on the boy's bedroom window, trying to peer inside with an icy, emotionless gaze. "Let me in. We have a special connection. You can't deny it." The man's cold, disturbing voice came through the crack in the window. The boy stayed silent, listening. As footsteps finally approached, his brother and friends had arrived. They didn't give the stranger a chance. His brother and several friends rushed outside to confront him. Shouting, threats, and curses rang out in the night. The man tried to justify himself, saying he only wanted to protect the boy, that this was a lesson about trusting strangers online. But his words couldn't hide the truth. In the dim light, his eyes revealed the madness and deceit behind them. Eventually, he was chased away, vanishing into the night as if he'd never existed. The boy stood there, shaken, his eyes brimming with tears, not just from fear, but from the pain of betrayal by someone he thought was his closest friend. A bitter lesson about how the virtual world isn't always what it seems. After that terrifying night, the boy's small room was no longer a haven. Every phone ring made his heart seize up. Every knock, no matter how soft, startled him awake in the middle of the night. His brother, his protector, and only source of comfort, stayed by his side, but the sense of safety never fully returned. The boy realized that the deepest wounds weren't physical. They were invisible scars left by betrayal and deceit. Medusa, a name that once symbolized trust and hope, has now become a bitter reminder of the lurking dangers online. He knew now that not everything was what it seemed, and not everyone deserved his trust. The world of screen conversations and sweet promises might just be a mask for a darkness he had never imagined. And that truth, painful as it was, became the most important lesson of his youth. He still played games, still made new friends, but the door to his heart had closed tighter. No more innocent trust, only cautious wisdom, a way to protect himself from the invisible ghosts lurking out there. And as night falls, every time his screen lights up, he remembers Medusa, the online friend who became a haunting that would never fade. That gamer wasn't easily frightened. Having endured hundreds of intense Fortnite matches, he believed he was accustomed to all the suspense and heart-pounding moments. But that night, when he decided to switch to Apex Legends, everything quickly spiraled out of his control. It was a late evening in May, and his house was so quiet that he could hear the wind rustling outside the window. His parents were out, celebrating their anniversary, and his brother was hanging out with friends somewhere far from home. He was alone, in his familiar room with 5 large windows facing different directions. A bedroom that wasn't just a place to rest, but also his secret fortress during gaming battles. The heavy gaming headset clamped tightly around his head, providing near-total noise cancellation, rendering all external sounds non-existent. On the screen, virtual characters were engaged in fierce combat, gunfire echoed, teammates shouted, all blending into a vibrant and lively virtual space so immersive that he nearly forgot he was in an entirely different place. But then, amidst it all, a message from an unknown phone number suddenly appeared. The content was just 2 sentences. "Look out the window," and "Don't look directly, but someone is standing out there." He froze, his heart pounding faster. The once familiar room suddenly felt cold and suffocating. The 5 surrounding windows, each with small streetlights outside and swaying trees in the wind, suddenly transformed into eerie shapes, making it impossible for him to take his eyes off them. He tried not to panic, set down his headset, and mustered the courage to look out each window one by one. In the darkest corner, where the streetlight failed to reach, he saw the silhouette of a man standing motionless. His face wasn't turned toward him, but just standing there in the darkness was enough to send chills down his spine. The feeling of being watched, of every breath and movement being observed, enveloped him like an invisible net, impossible to escape. He held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest, fully aware that this wasn't a normal incident. It was a warning. The room was no longer a refuge, but had become a dark labyrinth where the stranger could appear at any moment, slipping through every window crack. He knew one thing for certain: tonight would not be peaceful, and the person standing outside that window was not merely a shadow. He hadn't yet regained his composure when his phone rang. It was a message from his best friend, Brandon, who was playing with him. "Look out the window again. I just saw something." He felt a chill down his spine. Trying to stay calm, he slowly walked toward the dark corner window where the stranger had been standing. The streetlight outside was just enough to reveal the faint outlines of the figure. The man was dressed in black, short in stature, and his face couldn't be seen due to the enveloping darkness. Suddenly, a knock echoed from the window. The knock was irregular, not like a normal door knock, but more like a strange rhythm, as if trying to awaken something hidden deep within the house. He jumped back, his heart racing faster than ever. He tried to contact Brandon via microphone, asking if he was sure about what he saw. Brandon replied in a trembling voice, "No, it's not your imagination. Someone is standing there. Hold on, I'm calling the police now." But the knocking didn't stop. Each knock felt like a silent threat, a wordless challenge directed at him. He hurried to the kitchen table, his hands trembling as he dialed the emergency number. His fingers were sweaty as he pressed the buttons, his heart feeling like it was about to burst from his chest. Before he could complete the call, he heard soft but rapid footsteps outside the door. A sigh was heard, a cold sound like the wind whistling through the door crack. He turned toward the window and saw a hand reaching out, long and rough fingers beginning to knock harder. The stranger seemed to have moved, getting closer, his hand still knocking on the window, his face becoming more visible under the flickering streetlight. A bruised, bloody face with eyes that seemed insane. He managed to pick up the phone, his voice trembling as he described the situation to the police, then rushed to the front door to lock it. But a loud noise came from the window. The glass shattered, creating a hole large enough for the stranger to enter. Panic overwhelmed him. He backed away, searching for something to use as a weapon, but only a kitchen knife was within reach. He knew that in the next few minutes, everything could change forever. Shattered glass littered the floor, the large hole in the window now an open door for the nightmare to step into reality. The gamer, with trembling hands and a pounding heart, knew that every moment now could be his last. He had no time for hesitation or fear, only the kitchen knife, his sole weapon to protect his life. The intruder entered the house like a silent ghost, but each step echoed heavily, reverberating through the silent space with a threatening sound. His face was flushed, blood streaming down his hands, his eyes glowing in the darkness with uncontrollable madness. That gaze wasn't directed at him, but seemed to be probing, waiting for the moment to strike. He panicked, rushing toward the stairs, feeling every nerve in his body stretched to the limit. Each footstep of the intruder behind him felt like a death knell counting down his survival time. He climbed to the upper floor, heading to his parents' bedroom, the only place with a secure lock. He slammed the door shut, locked it tightly, then hurried into the bathroom, where he could add another layer of protection. The small bathroom door became the final fortress between him and the horrifying masked man. Cold sweat poured down, and he stood frozen in the darkness, trying to keep his breathing steady to avoid revealing his position. The phone in his hand trembled as he dialed 911. His voice quivered as he pleaded for help in the silent night. "There's a masked man who broke the window. He's broken into my house." Outside, the intruder's footsteps grew closer. He heard the bedroom door being pounded, not polite knocks, but violent, aggressive bangs, as if trying to smash the door and tear apart the last remnants of peace in the house. "Come out, I'll get in anyway," his voice growled, cold and threatening. He tried to suppress his panic, pressing his ear to the phone to listen for the police sirens. That was the saving sound, the only hope in this dark night. Something in the masked man's eyes flickered with panic. In a few breathless seconds, he paused, turned, and dashed out through the front door, which he had previously locked tightly. The sound of his footsteps faded away, replaced by the increasingly close sound of police sirens. The flashing lights outside reflected off the broken glass, creating chaotic streaks of light like fleeing nightmares. Police swarmed in, apprehending the horrifying man with handcuffs tightening around his bloody wrists. It turned out he was an obsessed individual whom the gamer had once defeated in a game, a psychopath unable to distinguish between the virtual and real worlds, to the point of seeking real-life revenge. He stood there, looking up at the starry night sky, still stunned and shivering. The world he once thought was a harmless game had now turned into an unpredictable nightmare. The boundary between the virtual and real worlds was fragile, easily shattered by a madman and an unlocked window. That night, even though everything had ended, the house never regained its original tranquility. The police had left. The bloodstains had been cleaned. The window had been temporarily covered with plywood to keep the darkness out. But there were cracks in his mind, fractures that no barrier could mend. He lay on the bed, unable to close his eyes. Every time he closed them, he saw the red eyes of the man, the chilling knocks, and the way he called his name through the microphone, with a voice that didn't belong to the normal world. No one knew exactly who he was. The police found obsessive notes in his phone, game names, account statistics, times he was defeated, hateful words scribbled as if recorded after each loss. and in the list of potential victims, only one name was marked in red: his. How long had he been watching him? How did he get Brandon's phone number, his home address? How did he know when he was alone? He had no answers, only a clear and heavy feeling that the world he once considered a place of entertainment, a place separate from reality, had cracked. And what made him shiver the most wasn't the insane actions of an individual, but the thought, how many others like him are silently watching the screen, memorizing player names, quietly gathering information, waiting for the right moment. From that day on, he no longer played Apex, no longer used headphones, and never left a window open at night. But sometimes, at 3 a.m., in a moment between sleep and wakefulness, he hears knocking, just light knocks, as if someone is testing whether this time he has locked the door. The 19-year-old guy wasn't the type to throw big birthday parties. For him, birthdays were just an excuse to hang out with close friends, have a simple dinner, or go on a relaxed outing. But that year, his birthday became different. A summer night when he and 3 friends decided to celebrate in a rougher way, off-roading under the moonlight in a large state park near home. It was late evening. The sky wasn't fully dark yet because of summer's long days. They drove to a vast forest area where narrow winding trails barely fit a Jeep. With no nighttime patrol, they easily bypassed the barriers and began their adventure. Inside the Jeep, music blasted. The smell of alcohol and marijuana filled the air, and the group was excited, ready to lose themselves in their world. The journey started enthusiastically. The Jeep maneuvered over bumpy dirt roads and tight curves. Laughter, music, and the rattling of the vehicle mixed, creating an atmosphere like an amusement park amidst wild nature. Then, deep in the forest, while everyone was absorbed in the music and the Jeep's headlights, a sharp, eerie scream echoed. A strange, piercing sound unlike anything they'd heard before, instantly making the air thick with tension. Everyone fell silent, exchanging confused looks. Jay, the driver, turned on the high beams but saw no one except the still woods. The scream didn't sound like any animal, and no one could explain where it came from. At that moment, a figure appeared beside the trail. A woman wearing a hoodie pulled tight over her head stood motionless and silent like a ghost. A wave of unease immediately spread. As she backed into the darkness of the old forest, the friends noticed more hooded figures silently standing around the Jeep, as if watching and waiting for something. On that summer night, deep in the woods, surrounded by unknown hooded figures, the Jeep seemed small and vulnerable like never before. After the strange scream echoed through the forest, the atmosphere inside the Jeep became suffocating. Everyone was silent, their eyes nervously scanning the darkness enveloping them. Jay, the driver, turned the headlights brighter, but the light only revealed dry tree trunks and the vast space of the woods. The woman in the hoodie still stood there, like a strange mark in the dark. She didn't say a word, didn't move except slowly retreating deeper into the shadow of the trees. Soon, the friends realized she was not alone. Before they could react, more hooded figures appeared, quietly emerging from all sides, surrounding the Jeep. These people stood still, silent, their eyes seeming to pierce through the glass, watching every movement inside. Despite the hot summer night, they wore hoodies zipped up tightly, creating a chilling image like ghosts in the deep forest. Inside the Jeep, Carl, slightly intoxicated, was the first to notice the danger. He shouted, "Guys, we're surrounded!" His yell startled everyone to look around, and at that moment, A man with hollow eyes stood right outside the rear windshield, the red light from the taillights shining directly on his face, creating a haunting and chilling image. Everyone's hearts pounded fast, panic spreading. Jay immediately started the engine, his hands trembling as he tried to accelerate on the rough, dirt path. The hooded figures stood silently, not chasing, but their presence felt like an invisible threat, crushing the group's minds. The Jeep sped through the dark, hitting rocks and roots hard, jolting everyone inside. Screams erupted chaotically as they tried to stay calm and prayed to escape the dark veil surrounding them. The path out of the trails took longer than expected, and with every passing minute, fear and anxiety grew. Finally, when they reached the paved main road, the streetlights appeared like a saving beacon amidst the darkness. The group breathed a sigh of relief. Jay stopped the car, looked at his friends seriously. "From now on, no one messes with those trails at night." They all nodded, still shaking. The silence inside the Jeep was the clearest proof of what they had just experienced. This was no ordinary group of people out for fun. They didn't move or speak, just stood there staring. And that eerie scream? It might not have been any animal sound as they first thought. That night, these young friends didn't just have a simple off-roading adventure. They encountered something mysterious and haunting, a darkness not of this world. Carl's scream exploded like a bomb in the quiet space. The group turned around, panic in their eyes, scanning all directions as the hooded figures appeared clearer in the headlights and taillights. There was no doubt. They were surrounded. Jay didn't hesitate, gripping the steering wheel tightly, his heart pounding as if about to burst. He knew that if he delayed even a second, the whole group would be trapped deep in the forest with these strangers. He started the car and stepped hard on the gas, the Jeep sliding over rocky, bumpy trails, the engine roaring fiercely. The hooded figures didn't try to chase, but their presence was like a curse, always lurking behind and beside the Jeep, suffocating the atmosphere with fear. Jay glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing hollow faces, cold eyes with no mercy. The sound of stones hitting the tires echoed steadily, making everyone inside clearly feel the lurking danger. Carl yelled, "Hurry up! They won't let us go!" Joey, sitting in the back, trembled, clutching his friend's hand. But the escape route was not easy. The trails became narrower, trees stretched out as if trying to grab the Jeep, and tight curves caused constant collisions. Once, a tire got stuck in a small hole, making everyone jump when they heard stones rattling, signaling a risk of losing control. Jay struggled to control the vehicle, but the pressure was overwhelming. A dark shadow suddenly flashed past the right side of the Jeep, making him flinch and swerve quickly to avoid it. People screamed, some fainted from fear and too much alcohol. Time dragged slowly, each second feeling like a minute, with the footsteps of darkness always watching, never taking their eyes off them. Finally, when the streetlights appeared in sight, the group felt revived. Jay sped through the gate out of the forest. The screams and fear gradually faded, replaced by relief. He stopped the Jeep by the roadside, opened the door for everyone to get out, his heart still pounding. Carl looked around, voice trembling. I don't know who they were, but they weren't normal people. Wearing hoodies on a hot summer night, standing still without saying a word. That was something different. And that scream? Not a fox or any animal? The group fell silent, their eyes filled with fear and questions about what they had just been through. That night was no longer just a simple off-roading fun, but a meeting with darkness, with invisible ghosts, beings standing on the edge of the human world, silently watching and waiting. None of them dared think about returning to those trails at night. What they expected to be a joyful birthday memory turned into an indelible nightmare. Since that night, None of the friends dared to mention the off-roading trip again. Whenever it was brought up, they fell silent, avoiding eye contact, as if recalling a vivid nightmare they could never escape. It wasn't just momentary fear, but a deep fracture in their souls. They could still feel the mysterious presence clinging to them, even weeks and months after leaving that dark forest. The feeling of being watched and surrounded never disappeared. Every time they stepped onto the trails, every nightfall, the memory of those hooded figures, their cold, silent eyes staring around the Jeep, still froze their blood. They wondered if those were truly people or ghosts existing in the old forest. Was that sharp scream a call from another world where humans do not belong? That night changed how they viewed safety and peace. Things once taken for granted. They learned that some places humans shouldn't go. Dark corners where light can't penetrate and some things reason can't explain. Most importantly, never underestimate strange sounds or mysterious shadows in the dark. Because some things are watching, waiting, and may never let go. Have you ever felt like you were being watched, even in the safest place, your own home? This story begins with what seemed like an ordinary children's birthday party, but concealed things no one expected. A nearly 12-year-old girl with a soul just beginning to grow up disliked joining the princess activities at her sister's birthday party. Instead of playing, she chose to sit alone in the hallway, playing games on her handheld console. There, she felt safer, away from loud eyes and laughter. Suddenly, a strange woman approached with an overly friendly smile and introduced herself as Aunt Sarah, someone the girl might have long forgotten, having rarely met before. Sarah said she had brought a big gift for the girl, a huge dollhouse, along with an extra birthday cake for the party. It sounded normal, but the oddness started from there. Sarah asked the girl to help carry the gift to the car, saying the cake needed to stay cold and shouldn't get spoiled. The girl felt a little suspicious but agreed, thinking it was a small task and a way to prove she wasn't a baby, as others thought. What stunned the girl was that the car's engine was still running, and inside sat a strange man. Sarah explained this was Uncle Dennis, the girl's uncle, trying to reassure her that everything was fine. But the uneasy feeling grew stronger as Sarah kept urging her to hurry. The girl began sensing something was wrong. Sarah's tense eyes and hurried gestures confused her. She decided to stop, grabbed Sarah's sleeve, and clearly said she didn't want to continue. Right then, a voice called her name from inside the house. Her mother and aunt were looking worriedly for her. Sarah's face showed anger as she tried to pull the girl toward the car, but the girl managed to run toward the calling voice, safely returning to her family's arms. After running back into the safe embrace of her mother and aunt, the girl couldn't stop her heart from pounding, and the cold shivering down her spine. The initial comfort of the party faded, replaced by a heavy feeling, as if an invisible darkness was enveloping her. Her mother immediately noticed something was off. Upon hearing the girl's story about the strange woman calling herself Aunt Sarah and the man in the car, her mother's eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and worry. She couldn't understand why a family member would behave so oddly, especially on such a joyful day. She promptly contacted the tea shop staff, reported the incident, and requested they check the security cameras for any suspicious activity. The atmosphere in the tea shop changed noticeably. Staff quickly put the shop on alert, locked all exits, and gathered all children and parents into a large room to ensure safety. The initial cheerful laughter was replaced by anxious looks and tired sighs. The girl sat beside her mother, eyes fixed on the main door, feeling as if someone was outside, watching her every step. The police were called to handle the case. When officers arrived, they carefully questioned the girl about Sarah and the man in the car. She recounted every detail as clearly as possible. The overly friendly smile, the cold and tense eyes, the fact that the car was running though no one was driving, and Sarah's urgent pushing that frightened her. Despite the clear and detailed description, the police found no leads on these people. No reports of missing persons or suspicious behavior linked to Sarah or Dennis. The name the woman claimed was the girl's uncle. However, the police warned the family about cases where strangers exploit public events to approach children with cunning tricks and advised them to stay vigilant. In the days that followed, the event haunted the girl deeply. She not only felt scared, but also betrayed by someone who should have been family. Whenever Aunt Sarah was mentioned, she shivered, remembering the forced smile, both friendly and cold, like two sides of the same person. Her mother often reminded her never to trust strangers, no matter how friendly or familiar they seemed. The girl's story became a cautionary tale, shared widely in the community as a reminder of dangers lurking even in the safest situations. She also changed her outlook on the world around her. In the following days, she kept her distance from strangers and even felt invisible eyes watching her whenever she left the house or played alone. Whether going to school or other birthday parties, she remained highly alert. The scariest thing wasn't what happened in that moment, but the lingering unease. The girl wondered who Sarah and the man really were, and if they were still out there somewhere, waiting for another chance. Her family decided not to hide the story. They shared it with friends, neighbors, and sought community help to raise awareness of similar schemes. People became more watchful at parties and children's gatherings, creating a safety network to protect the kids. The story was not just a warning bell, but a reminder that safety is never guaranteed. Sometimes danger hides behind the friendliest masks, and only vigilance and strong intuition can save us from peril. Though many days have passed, the girl can never forget that fateful day, when a seemingly simple birthday gift turned into the greatest challenge of her life. One afternoon after the party, the girl's mother received a call from the tea shop where the birthday was held. Staff reported that security cameras had captured images of the woman calling herself Aunt Sarah and the strange man. They had no identification and acted suspiciously when leaving the party area. This information prompted the mother to urgently contact the police. Officers immediately investigated, but found that Sarah and Dennis, the names the woman and man used, might not be their real identities. No records or traces matching those names appeared in any system. While the police searched for clues, the girl had to face nightmares. Every night she woke up to strange noises, faint hallway lights making her feel watched. The fear was invisible but very real, as if someone stood in the dark waiting for a chance. She began feeling unsafe even in her own home. Every time she opened doors or stepped outside, she scanned around anxiously. Her young mind kept asking unanswered questions. Who are Sarah and Dennis? What have they done before? Will they come back? One night, she woke up suddenly with the feeling of being watched. Streetlights cast strange shadows into her room through the window. She felt her heart pounding when she saw a figure standing outside her bedroom window, eyes cold and predatory. She stayed silent, afraid to breathe loudly, her heart pounding out of her chest. It wasn't a ghost, but a real person, standing silently watching her every move. Terrified, she ran to her parents' room and told them everything. They immediately checked all the windows and doors, making sure the house was tightly locked. They even installed security cameras and an alarm system to protect the family. But in the following nights, the shadow kept appearing. Not once, but many times at different moments. Each time, The girl felt watched without a break. The police were called again and again, but could never catch the stranger. All traces were as faint as ghosts in the night. She realized that the strange woman and man were not just random intruders. They might be planning something, waiting for an opportunity to act on dark intentions. The birthday that once seemed joyful turned into endless days of horror, where she no longer felt safe even in her own home. Time passed, but fear lingered in the girl's mind like an indelible scar. Even when people said everything was over, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, stalked from the darkness outside. The house that was once a peaceful refuge became a prison, where every step was monitored. Every small noise startled her, her heart pounding. The suspicious, cold eyes of the strange woman often appeared in her hazy dreams, making sleep impossible. Her family did everything possible to protect her, from installing security cameras to being cautious of every visitor. Yet the feeling of insecurity never fully disappeared. She learned that safety isn't just the presence of protective tools or people, but peace within the soul, something she lost since that birthday night. Her story became a warning for everyone, especially parents, about lurking dangers even in moments that seem most joyful and safe. That some people exploit innocence, trust, and family ties to hide dark schemes. Now older, the girl still lives with that memory like a ghost she can't escape. Every time she sees a stranger, she recalls the old advice: never trust strangers, no matter how familiar they seem. Because dark secrets always hide, waiting for the moment to reveal themselves. And innocent people bear the consequences. The 21st birthday is a significant milestone, the gateway to adulthood and freedom. This guy couldn't miss the occasion, especially since he was allowed to host the party at his wealthy uncle's villa, which had a spacious backyard and a dreamlike swimming pool. It was going to be a memorable night, a festival filled with laughter, music, and beer. He invited all his friends and told them to bring their beer to avoid trouble. At first, everything went according to plan. Music blared from the garden speakers. People were happy, dancing, and immersed in the festive atmosphere. But as the night deepened, the number of guests kept growing, far beyond his control. His friends brought along other friends, some strangers he had never met before. The backyard gate stood wide open, and dozens of people, whether by chance or design, walked in, turning the party into a chaotic sea of people. He tried to monitor who came and went, but the overwhelming crowd and the night's fun distracted him. Police arrived around midnight after neighbors complained about the noise. They forced the crowd to disperse, leaving only a small group of close friends by the pool. Rob, his best friend, was drunk, lying on the sofa, unaware of what was happening. He checked the house, locked the back doors, closed the gate tightly, and then intended to go to his bedroom to rest. But when he stepped onto the second-floor balcony, he paused, feeling something strange. In the darkness, he saw a figure standing still on the ground floor, eyes directed at him, but the face was blurred and unrecognizable. Footsteps echoed in the quiet house, making his heart beat faster. Rob's even breathing came from the living room, but that shadow showed no sign of leaving. A cold shiver spread. The birthday party had turned into an unfinished nightmare. He stood there on the balcony, eyes fixed on the figure below. A chill ran down his spine. His heart raced faster than at any point that night. He whispered Rob's name, but only heard the steady breathing. Rob was too drunk to notice the looming danger. The party host quickly went downstairs, moving gently to avoid making noise that would attract the stranger's attention. He crept closer and realized it was a stranger dressed in black, face hidden under a hood, standing motionless like a ghost in the shadows. His hand touched his phone, intending to call 911 but afraid to make a sound. He breathed evenly, trying to stay calm amid the overwhelming panic. The stranger slowly moved toward the living room where Rob was sleeping, unaware of the danger. In that moment, he realized something terrifying. This was no accidental intruder. The man knew someone drunk was in the house, knew where to strike. He was a predator, waiting for the right moment. He quietly called the police, reporting the situation and giving the address. Before he finished speaking, the back door suddenly slammed open. The stranger had entered the house easily. His heart stopped seeing the man calmly walk through the living room, cold eyes fixed on Rob like prey. He had to act, but any noise might alert the intruder. He tiptoed upstairs, locked his bedroom door, then hurriedly called the police again, describing every step and movement inside the house. Time seemed to freeze as he listened to the knocking on the door and heavy breathing outside. The intruder didn't give up, trying every way to enter the room. He muttered prayers, waiting for help. Finally, police sirens sounded outside, flashing lights shining through the window. The stranger panicked, trying to escape through the wide-open back door. Officers stormed in, immediately apprehending him. Rob woke up, confused, unaware of what had happened, while the birthday host still felt chills from the horrific night. What was supposed to be a joyful 21st birthday party turned into a haunting memory of a break-in, uninvited darkness, and the fragility of safety. That night, as he stood on the second-floor balcony, eyes watching the stranger below, his heart seemed ready to leap out of his chest. Everything suddenly fell silent, as if the whole world awaited a dark moment about to unfold. He quietly called Rob's name, but only heard steady breathing, no response. His friend was too drunk to realize the impending danger. Helplessness overwhelmed him. He couldn't wake Rob and had to protect himself. He crept down the stairs, each step light to avoid noise. His eyes never left the figure, a stranger in black with a hood, standing like a ghost in the dark. The man said nothing, didn't move, only looked around as if surveying and planning. His phone vibrated as he tried calling 911. With a trembling voice, he whispered the situation, trying to stay calm. Police promised to arrive soon, but with every passing minute, his fear grew. The stranger suddenly moved, silently approaching the living room. He knew he had to act fast, or it would be too late, but his footsteps could give him away, and that could be even more dangerous. He retreated to his room, locked the door firmly, then called the police again, confirming the intruder was inside. Knocking and breathing outside grew louder. The intruder tried to break the door, picked the lock, and even banged so hard the door shook. He trembled but kept quiet to avoid detection. Those waiting moments dragged endlessly, every small noise making him jump. He knew if the intruder succeeded, everything would change forever. Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass came from the back window. He didn't know how the intruder entered, but clearly, the man was familiar with the house and well prepared. The back door stood wide open. Police lights flickered in the yard. Sirens wailed like a sentence for the intruder. He panicked, sprinted out the back door, leaving everything behind, including a blood-stained trail on his hand. Police rushed inside, subdued, and handcuffed him. This wasn't a normal thief. He was a psychopath obsessed with the birthday host due to an Apex Legends match the host had won. The man had gathered personal information, including addresses and phone numbers of friends, just to take revenge in real life. Rob woke up confused. The birthday host stood there, both relieved and shivering, realizing how dangerously real and intertwined the virtual and real worlds could be. All night, police stayed, taking statements and making reports. The host and his family could never forget the terror they had endured. The next day, as things settled, he sat reflecting. The memorable birthday party had become a bitter lesson about the fragility of safety and unforeseen dangers. He understood that no matter how attractive and engaging the virtual world might be, it could never replace vigilance and awareness of real-life safety. This lesson was for him, and anyone who thought that turning off the device meant all dangers disappeared. That birthday night, instead of laughter and joy, he received a cold reminder. This world, virtual or real, always holds shadows that not everyone can see. Though the intruder was caught by police, the fear inside him never fully vanished. The house, once his peaceful refuge, had become a symbol of a terrifying night where safety was just a fragile illusion. Every nightfall, he still feels cold eyes watching, though the stranger's figure is gone. Invisible footsteps, sighs in the night wind, and random creaking doors wake him up. He no longer dares to host any parties at home. Whenever friends come over, he feels the need to stay alert, monitoring every movement, every step. The freedom he once had is now suffocated by undefined fear. His story became a warning for all, that safety is never guaranteed, and the outside world, no matter how familiar, is filled with dangers. He realized some things can never go back to how they were, and some wounds of the soul can never fully heal. Sometimes darkness is not just darkness. It is a part of life that you must learn to live with. That 21st birthday night, instead of a joyful memory, became an unforgettable milestone, reminding him that terrifying truths always lurk nearby, just waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The first time Emily came to Colorado, she thought it would be just a normal ski trip, a vacation with friends, fun and relaxing. But everything quickly took a dark turn, filled with shadows and unforgettable feelings. Emily, 24 years old, along with her three close friends Angel, Amy, and Jessica, arrived at the small town of Snowmass, right next to the famous Aspen Mountain ski area. They rented a spacious 4-bedroom Airbnb house with a large balcony overlooking the snow-covered mountain range. An outdoor hot tub promised to be the perfect place to unwind after long days on the slopes. But from the very first night, the atmosphere inside the house made them uneasy. After a tiring flight, the group took an Uber straight to the house, and by then it was late at night. The cold wind whistled through the leaves, and the sounds echoed in the wild surroundings, creating a feeling that was both peaceful and eerie. They went out to a bar to relieve stress, but Emily could not forget the eyes of the strangers around the place. Eyes that seemed to be scrutinizing, carrying an indescribable meaning that gave her goosebumps. The next day, as she headed up the mountain, Emily tried to learn how to snowboard on the blue slope, a longer and more difficult run than usual. She kept failing, falling many times until she felt discouraged. While resting by the edge of the slope, trying to catch her breath, a strange man appeared nearby. He looked clumsy as well, but his cold eyes and unnatural smile sent chills down Emily's spine. He started a conversation, asking seemingly harmless questions, but the atmosphere in this wilderness made everything feel different, full of hidden meanings and threats. Emily felt like she was being watched, each word carrying an uncomfortable layer, as if the man was waiting for an opportunity. This was only the beginning of a series of terrifying events that would force Emily and her friends to confront inexplicable fears. After the first encounter with the strange man on the mountain slope, Emily couldn't shake the chilling feeling from her mind. Despite trying to avoid him, he quietly appeared in places she didn't expect, like a ghost stalking her every step. The next morning, as Emily and her friends prepared to head up the mountain again, she happened to see him standing across the road, distant, but with those cold eyes fixed directly on her. Emily immediately timidly slipped into the crowd of friends, trying to hide her fear, but the unease only grew stronger with every passing minute. Throughout the day, as the group wandered around Snowmass Town, visiting shops and cafes, Emily still felt him like a ghost following her. Once she looked out the window and saw the stranger standing silently outside, saying nothing, barely moving, but those eyes made her unable to look away. As night fell, the atmosphere grew heavier. Emily couldn't sleep because she felt like someone was standing outside her bedroom window, watching. She tried to convince herself it was just paranoia caused by travel stress, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. On the third day on the mountain, as Emily struggled to get used to the snowboard, she decided to rest alone by the slope's edge. She sat there, gasping for breath after many falls, eyes staring into the distance, mind in turmoil. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her, growing faster until a shadow appeared right in front of her. It was the man she had seen before. He stood still, expressionless face, cold eyes as if searching for something deep inside her. He asked trivial questions but made Emily feel interrogated. "Who did you come here with? How long have you been here? Does anyone protect you?" Though he covered his face with a beanie and goggles, she knew he wouldn't easily let go. Emily felt suffocated, cold spreading from her neck down to her feet. She stood up, trying to retreat, but the shadow slowly approached, like a predator unwilling to miss its chance. The peak of panic made her call Amy immediately, begging for her friends to come. Once the group gathered, they unanimously decided to leave the area as soon as possible. The cheerful mood turned heavy. Smiles vanished, replaced by anxious looks, evasive words, and heightened alertness. They returned to the Airbnb house, but the feeling of insecurity lingered. Emily knew one thing clearly. That man was not just a harmless stranger. He carried a dark secret and an intent her group never imagined. After retreating from the mountain slope, Emily and her friends thought everything would end there. But the true horror began when they returned to the Airbnb, once a peaceful resting place, now the setting for a real nightmare. The first night after the incident, the group gathered in the living room, trying to reassure each other that it was just heightened sensitivity. But deep inside, everyone harbored a simmering fear. Emily couldn't sit still, her eyes constantly watching the windows where the thick darkness outside seemed to swallow every bit of light. Near 2 a.m., soft footsteps echoed on the wooden floor of the house. Emily was startled, looked around, and realized everyone else had gone upstairs, leaving her alone on watch. The footsteps didn't sound like anyone in the house. They were silent, stealthy, like a creature moving quietly to avoid detection. Suddenly, she heard the living room door creak open slightly, and a pitch-black figure slipped past the door, just enough for her to see a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette hidden under the dim light. She gasped for breath, heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst from her chest. Emily quietly locked her door, took out her phone, and called 911 while trying not to make a sound. She whispered that an intruder was sneaking in. On the other end, the female dispatcher's voice was gentle but serious. "Stay quiet. The police will arrive in a few minutes. Do not make a sound." At that moment, knocking came on Emily's door, steady and urgent. A soft but cold voice whispered, "Open the door. You know I'm here." Emily trembled, frozen by the sound. The door shook from strong pushes. The knocking echoed so loudly she thought it would break through the door. She yelled into the phone, "He's trying to break in." I'm calling the police." The stranger stopped knocking, then said mockingly, "It's okay, darling. I don't want to hurt you tonight." The shadow retreated, and footsteps quickly faded away. Emily held the phone tightly, her heart racing for several minutes afterward. Police arrived just 10 minutes later, but upon checking the house, they found no sign of forced entry. All doors and windows were locked, except Emily's door still showed marks of being pushed hard. The group stayed awake all night, haunted by thoughts of the mysterious man, unable to return to normal. Emily could not erase from her mind his cold words and the lingering question, "I don't want to hurt you tonight." Were they still safe? After that horrifying night, Emily and her friends couldn't continue their trip as planned. They pulled out of the Airbnb the very next day, leaving behind the snow-covered mountains and lurking darkness. But the fear did not easily leave them. Emily returned to the city in turmoil. She couldn't sleep. The knocking on the door still echoed in her mind, and the image of the cold figure with the fake smile haunted her every night. She couldn't forget the threatening words of that man, "I don't want to hurt you tonight." Those words were more than a threat. They were a promise, a warning that the shadow hadn't yet let her go. Friends and family tried to comfort her, saying it was all pressure, stress, or imagination. But Emily knew clearly that horror was not just in her head. There are things beyond reason, shadows that can't be explained in words, lurking in the darkness, not only on the cold mountains, but also in her daily life. Emily's story is not a ghost legend. It is the truth, a warning to anyone who thinks vacations are safe. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't ghosts or demons, it's humans and the darkness they carry with them. And even now, when she closes her eyes, Emily still hears the knocking. That knocking never stops, never ends, like a reminder that darkness never truly leaves. A trip that seemed like a place to find peace turned into a nightmare when the darkness in the forest was no longer just darkness. Mark, 28 years old, a resilient software engineer, decided to leave the noisy city behind and head to the mountains of Oregon, where his parents once owned an old cabin beneath the Bachelor Mountains. This was his first visit since his father's sudden death, hoping to find peace of mind alongside his only companion, his loyal dog, Midnight. The first day was uneventful. Snow fell thickly, the sky was gray, and cold wind howled through the tall pine trees. Mark strolled with Midnight, savoring the peaceful feeling amidst nature. He often lounged in the living room, watching movies and drinking to chase away his worries. But on the third day, as the snowfall thickened, Mark discovered strange footprints around the cabin. The prints were fresh, as if made just minutes ago. What was astonishing was that no one had rented cabins nearby, and the surrounding houses were all empty. Mark tried to reason it out, thinking the footprints might belong to a hunter or a lost wanderer, but he couldn't shake the chill every time he looked at them. Midnight started to panic, growling and refusing to take his eyes off the deep forest area. At night, while lying in bed, Mark heard prolonged footsteps on the roof, long, heavy steps, unlike those of any familiar animal. When he took a flashlight out onto the balcony to check, his beam shone directly on a giant figure, face indistinguishable, sitting between two high branches near the cabin. The shadow stood nearly 9 feet tall, gaunt, with pale white hands clutching the upper branches, mouth wide open and hollow like a monster from a fairy tale. Mark stood frozen, his heart filled with invisible fear. Midnight stood beside him, trembling and softly barking as if warning of an unseen danger. That moment marked the beginning of a nightmare Mark could not escape. After that horrifying night seeing the strange figure in the tree, Mark couldn't erase the image from his mind. The persistent feeling of being watched caused him endless sleepless nights. Midnight, his dog, was no longer cheerful. It constantly stood guard, alert to every strange sound around the cabin. The next day, snow continued to fall heavily, covering everything in white. Mark decided not to leave the cabin, but to rest, hoping things would calm down. Yet the strange occurrences kept happening. When he went out for a walk with Midnight, Mark noticed new footprints around the house. Though the snow was thick, these prints looked fresher than the previous ones. Strangely, they didn't follow a straight path but circled the cabin, creating the impression that someone or something was guarding the place, watching his every step. Mark looked toward the dense forest behind the house, where thick darkness and dense trees stood. He sensed an unusual silence, not the peacefulness of nature, but a heavy stillness, as if something was waiting there. At night, while lying in bed, Midnight suddenly stood up, ears perked, whining. Mark heard gentle knocking on the balcony door, steady and continuous, unlike wind or animals. He jumped up, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out onto the balcony. The light flickered through the window, shining into the nearby forest. Once again, the figure appeared within his sight. A tall, thin silhouette with long, pale arms, standing silently among the trees, unmoving, but with eyes that seemed to pierce Mark's soul. He wanted to shine the light directly on the figure to see more clearly, but an invisible force stopped him. Mark felt as if a voice echoed in his head. "Don't do that. Don't call it out." Back inside, Mark locked the doors tightly and drew the curtains. But the knocking continued outside for hours afterward. Midnight stood guard by the door, too cautious to approach the knocking, eyes glowing with vigilance. Mark felt trapped in a game he couldn't understand. He didn't know what it was, a ghost, a demon, or something else. But one thing was certain. That darkness was no accident, and it was trying to communicate, even lure him outside. Afraid and exhausted, Mark decided he wouldn't stay much longer. But he couldn't leave immediately because a big question remained unanswered. Who was that shadow? And why did it choose him and this place as its refuge? On the third night, as the darkness descended thicker than ever, Mark sensed that the presence of that shadow was no longer a hallucination. It was stepping into his living space. In the stillness of the late night, the first soft knock sounded from the balcony door. But this time, the knocking was not merely a sound. It was like a sinister invitation, rhythmic and more urgent. Mark woke in a panic, his ears straining to catch every tiny noise. Midnight, his loyal dog lying beside him, immediately woke and barked softly, as if signaling an invisible danger. Mark got out of bed, grabbed his flashlight and thick jacket, preparing to face the unseen yet very present threat. As he stepped onto the balcony, the flashlight swept all around. Everything remained silent and covered in white snow. Then, a shadowy figure appeared right in the middle of the tall trees nearby. The figure was nearly 3 meters tall, gaunt, with long, pale arms gripping the branches like a predator waiting for its chance. Mark swallowed hard, trying to stay calm, but every muscle in his body was taut like a stretched string. Just as he was about to call out, Midnight suddenly let out a sharp, cold bark and darted into the dense, dark forest behind. He chased after Midnight, but as soon as he entered the thick woods, the figure vanished without a trace, as if it had never existed. A dense, cold fog covered the area, obscuring his vision and making Mark feel trapped and isolated in the dark wilderness. Returning to the cabin, Mark found the outdoor storage shed door ajar, snow on the ground trampled wildly, and inexplicable footprints circling the area. While checking his belongings, he noticed some items had been moved, and a few small things had mysteriously disappeared. This made Mark realize that the shadow was not only observing, but had invaded his living space, playing a game whose rules he did not know. That night, unknown footsteps echoed around the cabin, rhythmic but uneven, making Mark's heart feel like it would shatter. He heard distant whispers, like invitations or warnings. The words were unclear but thick with menace. Midnight couldn't sleep, always standing by the window, eyes glowing brightly, occasionally growling a warning. Mark decided he could no longer live in this nightmare and began planning to leave as soon as possible. Yet deep inside, part of him wanted to understand the mystery of that shadow. What had trapped it deep in the forest, and why it had chosen him as its target. Finally, unable to endure the torment from the invisible darkness any longer, Mark decided to leave the cabin, leaving behind what he once thought was a peaceful place to return to the real world. But fear was not something so easily left behind. Even as his car rolled along the snow-covered road, images of the shadow on the tree, the nighttime knocking, and the strange whispers in the forest still haunted Mark's mind. He knew he wasn't just running away from a place, but trying to escape something unseen yet always present beside him. Midnight, his loyal dog, had changed too. No longer the happy dog it once was. It became vigilant, constantly watching the darkness around the house, as if fully aware that the shadow hadn't left. Friends and family advised Mark to see it as mere hallucinations or dreams caused by stress. But Mark understood better than anyone else. What he encountered deep in the forest was not a product of imagination. Some things exist alongside everyday life, ghosts that don't need to moan or scream to spread fear. They just silently stand there, watching you, waiting, and sometimes inviting you to join their game. Mark's story is not a ghost legend, but a profound warning for anyone who thinks they can separate themselves from the lurking darkness outside. And now, when night falls and the wind whistles through the trees, remember, sometimes darkness is not just darkness. It can be a gaze, a sigh, or a gentle but persistent knocking. And if you are brave enough, listen, but never open the door. Jason once believed that his family's winter cabin in Vermont was a safe place, a peaceful retreat amid trees and snow where everyday worries were left behind. But everything changed in just one night. The large 3-story house with an attic reserved for his parents stood proudly atop a small hill, surrounded by dense pine trees and cold silver moonlight. Outside, there was a warehouse filled with skiing equipment, snowblowers, and other winter gear. Jason and his girlfriend Melissa usually left the warehouse door open when they stayed there, thinking that the area was so remote no one would care about what they left behind. However, that peace was only a facade for the darkness about to descend. One early winter day, as Jason was preparing to teach Melissa how to snowboard on a self-made slope behind the house, he heard a voice echoing from the forest. "Hello." The sound was cold and indistinct, causing both to stop in confusion. They looked around, seeing only snow-covered pines, no sign of people or life. Jason called back, but was met with deadly silence. As night fell, strange footsteps appeared near the warehouse. Jason went outside to check and saw the warehouse door ajar, though he was sure he had locked it earlier. No one was inside the house, but strange footprints were imprinted around the area. Melissa began to feel scared, suggesting they lock the door tightly and avoid going outside at night. Both knew that something was wrong, something lurking and watching them from the darkness. And that night, when the moon hid behind clouds, something not of this world appeared, creating an unforgettable nightmare. After the cold call echoed from the forest, Jason and Melissa sensed an unusual presence around the cabin, a presence that defied rational explanation. What was supposed to be a peaceful retreat suddenly turned into a series of tense and unsettling days. The next day, Jason decided to check the outdoor warehouse, filled with skiing equipment and snowblowers, essentials for the winter vacation. But as he approached, a wave of unease enveloped him like a silent storm. The warehouse door was no longer tightly closed as before. A small gap allowed light from outside to creep in. Jason cautiously opened the door to inspect. Inside, there was no one, no clear physical trace. But outside, he noticed fresh footprints pressed into the snow-covered ground. These prints did not follow a straight path but circled the warehouse, then disappeared into the dense forest behind. He called Melissa to come and see. She stared at the footprints with frightened eyes, her heart racing. Both began to realize it was not just some stranger who had come here, but something that silently existed, constantly watching their every step. That night, the atmosphere inside the cabin grew heavier. Jason and Melissa tried to stay calm, but the sudden knocking on the living room window in the dead of night startled them. The knocks were gentle but steady, prolonged continuously, like a sinister invitation they could not ignore. Jason turned on his flashlight and shone it toward the window. The beam cut through the darkness but revealed only snow and thick trees. No clear figure appeared, but then, right in the nearby tree canopy, a vague shape emerged. A tall figure, gaunt, with pale white hands clutching the tree branches. The face was indistinguishable, only a hollow, wide-open mouth like a creature not of this world. Jason wanted to shine the light strongly, to illuminate the figure and understand more, but an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. A strange voice echoed in his mind like a warning. "Don't do that. Don't call it out." Melissa tightly held Jason's hand, trembling as she urged him to lock the doors securely and draw the curtains. All night, the knocking continued persistently, and strange whispers echoed from the deep forest, preventing them from sleeping. They felt trapped in a psychological game where the player was none other than darkness, not a ghost, not a spirit, but a silent entity watching and lurking, waiting to spread terror. Jason and Melissa knew they couldn't prolong their stay here any longer. Yet part of Jason still wanted to uncover the mystery. What was that dark shadow? Why had it chosen this place and them as its targets? On the third night at the cabin, as darkness engulfed the entire hill, Jason knew that what awaited him was no longer imagination or baseless anxiety. It was a living entity, present very close, very real. Near 2 a.m., the knocking on the living room window sounded again, more frequent and intense than before. Jason woke up, his heart pounding as if about to leap out of his chest. Silently, he put on his jacket, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out of the room, while Melissa trembled, lying still on the bed with wide-open eyes, afraid to close them. The flashlight beam pierced through the thick darkness, illuminating every hidden corner around the cabin. Outside, snow blanketed everything in white. The forest stood silent like a giant black curtain. Then, within Jason's sight, a large figure appeared among the tree branches. The tall, gaunt figure, immense in stature, stunned him. Pale white hands clung tightly to the high branches, mouth wide open and hollow, face blurred like an outcast creature not belonging to the human world. The shadow's gaze seemed to pierce Jason's soul, awakening the utmost terror. Jason swallowed hard, his legs frozen stiff. He wanted to shine the light directly on the figure to see it clearly, but an invisible wave of fear held him back, making him do nothing but slowly retreat toward the cabin. Suddenly, the dog Midnight dashed toward the shadow, barking loudly, causing the figure to silently vanish into the deep forest like a wisp of smoke. Jason's heart pounded fiercely, blood rushing through his veins. He chased after Midnight deep into the woods, trying to catch up with the shadow. But he only saw a dense cold fog enveloping everything, his vision blurred, and a terrifying silence as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Returning to the cabin, Jason found the warehouse door wide open, footprints around wildly disturbed. Some belongings had been moved from their original places, creating a chaotic scene. All that night, strange footsteps, eerie whispers, and knocking on the window never ceased. Melissa and Jason stayed awake, holding hands in panic. Jason understood that the dark shadow was not just a fleeting presence. It had become the master of the house, playing a game whose rules he had yet to understand. Their safety was seriously threatened, and they had to face a horror they did not yet fully know. Jason and Melissa hurriedly left that cold hill behind, abandoning sleepless nights, pounding knocks on the door, and the tall, gaunt, soulless figure perched in the tree branches. They thought that once they left, all the fear would disappear. But reality was far more complicated than that. Even after returning to the bustling city, the darkness still pursued them. That image lingered relentlessly in Jason's mind. The giant figure, pale white hands like dry branches, the cold gaze that never blinked. Every night when he closed his eyes, the knocking and the dark sighs echoed back, jolting him awake in panic. Melissa was no longer the cheerful, vibrant girl she once was. She became afraid of the dark, alert to the slightest sound, living in a wordless fear. The darkness they encountered was not a product of imagination or stress, but an entity, something existing parallel to their world. Some ghosts don't need to moan or appear clearly to be terrifying. They just stand there silently, staring at you, waiting for a moment of weakness to step into your life. Jason's story is not just a horrific experience, it is a warning to anyone who thinks they can avoid darkness by running away. And if one day you hear knocking at night or feel an invisible gaze watching you, remember, don't open the door, don't look back, because the darkness never truly leaves. The stories you just heard didn't begin with screams. They began with laughter, polite hellos, a casual date, or an ordinary lunch. And then, they slowly slipped across the boundary into fear. Slowly, so slowly, no one noticed until it was too late. Have you ever trusted the wrong person? Have you ever heard something in the middle of the night you couldn't explain? Have you ever looked back on a happy memory, only to realize how close you came to dying? If so, you're not alone. Hit like if this video gave you chills. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories, ones you won't find in movies. And comment below, which story gave you the worst goosebumps? And have you ever experienced a vague warning in real life? We're here to tell the tales and to listen, even to the ones no one dares speak. See you in the next video. If you're brave enough to return,